been steady for about 72 hours or so, as the boys in Vegas are yelling at us that they believe Texas Tech is going to handle BYU rather easily. 10.5-point spread is where we find ourselves. College Game Day will be down there. Back-to-back trips for College Game Day in Big 12 country. Of course, they were up here for Utah, Cincinnati last week. And you have to kind of take into account, of course, that Texas Tech is not only at home, but Texas Tech has the respect of the world of college football right now. We continue to talk about these advanced metrics that really like Tech, that really like Utah, and they kind of like BYU. Now, if you're BYU, the bottom line is this. You have passed every test that has been thrown at you. Most recently, in Ames, Iowa, a place that's really tough to play against Iowa State. BYU, the number one team in the Big 12. They're 5-0 in conference. They're 8-0 overall. Texas Tech right behind them, though. They're 5-1 in conference, and they're 8-1 overall. So we'll get to some Big 12 storylines. Of course, the Utes on a bye. The Utes very much alive as far as what could potentially manifest itself over the final 3-4 weeks of the season. Utah will close at Baylor and Waco. Final home game of the season is K-State. No start time announced for that. We do know that the post-Thanksgiving tilt against Kansas will be at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So that is an early kick. BYU, Texas Tech, a very early kick. I wonder if they're keeping that in mind as far as Brigham Young having to travel a time zone to have an early kick against Texas Tech. But a 10 a.m. time slot, a noon time slot Eastern, means there will be a lot of eyes on this game. And when you look at the landscape of the national slate, this really is the marquee game coming up this week, not just in the Big 12, but a national college football landscape as well. We get a little college football tonight in Los Angeles. Number 19 USC welcomes in Northwestern. And we'll look at the landscape of college football. Once upon a time, folks circled the Indiana-Penn State game. That's no longer the case at Beaver Stadium and University Park, Pennsylvania, because Penn State is 0-5 in conference. James Franklin, of course, has been relieved of his duties. Georgia's on the road at Mississippi State. You got Ohio State, Purdue. Texas A&M, Missouri, a top 25 matchup. Mizzou was without their quarterback the rest of the year, but a big game for Oregon in Iowa City at Kinnick Stadium. Top 20 matchup there. Oregon badly in need of some style points and some big wins because the committee told us they don't value them the way that the AP values them. So we'll get to some college football storylines on the program today, and we'll do a little NFL, but I don't know that I really care to talk about the game last night. Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime, and this was not one of those like, hey, the defenses were awesome. It was a pathetic display from both teams, quite frankly. Now, if you're a Broncos fan, you've won 7 straight football games. That defense is nasty. Geno Smith did not look like he belongs playing pro quarterback anymore, but 10-7, and you could tell even Al Michaels was bored. Kirk Herbstreit was bored calling that game. But Week 10 of the NFL got rolling last night. Of course, full Sunday slate. Your Sunday night game will be the Steelers and the Chargers. And your Monday night game should be a good one in Lambeau in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the Eagles take on the Packers. So some pro football on the show today as well. We have Utah women's hoops tonight. The Utah women are up in Logan to take on Utah State. We're going to send you to pregame coverage of that at about 5:45. So we will say goodnight a little bit earlier than we typically do at our 6 o'clock slot, and we'll get you ready for some Utah women's hoops. The Utah men and Alex Jensen back at it tomorrow at the Huntsman Center. They welcome in Weber. It is the first home game for A.J. DeBonsa and Brigham Young. They welcome in Holy Cross after their opening season win over Villanova. So, a little college basketball, of course, it is that time of year. It is the Emirates NBA Cup. You can feel the buzz. You cannot. But we will talk some NBA basketball today, and it is the triumphant return of one Tony Jones, who will be our first guest on the program. Tony was here in the market prior to moving over to the NBA beat for a number of different years. Tony covered a lot of everything, high school sports, college sports, Utah, BYU. He did a little bit of everything before moving over to the Jazz beat for the Trib and then landing with the Athletic. And Tony has now moved back to Philadelphia, but he keeps his pulse on the eyes of the Utah Jazz. So we'll do some NBA and some Utah Jazz with Tony today. We're going to go live to Lubbock, and we're going to interview Spencer Linton today, our friend from BYU TV. We will get a comprehensive preview of BYU Texas Tech on the program. We will do a little bit of golf with Paul Pugmire on the show today, as we do every Friday. Paul hosts our golf show every Saturday, so we'll kind of kick the tires on the current state of the PGA Tour, local golf scene, and do a little golf with Paul today. And then live in studio for an entire hour during the 4 o'clock hour, former Utes and longtime NFL vet, Super Bowl champ, Trevor Riley joins us live in studio. I had a chance to hang out with Trev this last week at a symposium down at UVU that featured Mark Harlan and Brian Santiago. On the panel, a lot of conversations about the current state of college sports, college athletics, and the challenges that administrators have when it comes to the changing world that we all kind of experienced. And it changed a lot on July the 1st, and it is a new reality of college sports. Little known fact, Trevor Riley was recruited highly by Texas Tech, and I believe Mike Leach was the coach when they wanted Trev to come down and play there. So Trevor's familiar with Texas Tech. Of course, he's familiar with BYU, and obviously we'll talk some Utes as well. Utah trying to get healthy, get ready for the final stretch of the season during this bye week before the final 3 games of the year. So we've got Tony Jones, we have Spencer Litton, we have Paul Pugmire, and Trevor Riley with a jam-packed Friday edition of the show. So let's get to it before Tony stops by, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends, too, at Prize Picks. It's time now for your opening tip. You guys already know that Prize Picks is the best way to win cash on football. We've told you that all year long, whether it's the Niners, whether it's the Broncos, the Raiders, or if you're a Jets fan, sorry about that. Best place to win cash on football. Well, basketball is officially back. Pro basketball is back. Prize Picks is also the best way to win cash on the Jazz or the Lakers or the Warriors or the Knicks, whoever your favorite team is. You should definitely check it out on Prize Picks. Step number 1 is downloading the Prize Picks app today and using the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. Prize Picks now offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. If you want to pick more on Steph Curry's points, 3-pointers and assists, Larry Markkanen's points, rebounds, and blocks, you can pick all of them in the same lineup, only on Prize Picks. Follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app. Copy their lineups in one click, whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just someone whose picks you like. Hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on Prize Picks. Once again, our good friends at Prize Picks offering you free money. Use that promo code ESPN700, because on Prize Picks, it is always good to be right. All right, Utah on a bye this week. It's going to be interesting to see how the college football landscape changes over the course of this weekend, depending on certain results. And if you're a Utah fan, even though this is a bye week, this has been a good week for you. This has been a good week for the Utes, because as of Tuesday night, when the college football rankings were released, the first iteration of them, everything changed for the Utes, because you realized. And it's kind of interesting to do the exercise that we've continued to do, I would say, over the course of the past 3-4 weeks. After BYU beat Utah, there was certainly a very despondent feel up here in Salt Lake City a few weeks back when Utah went down to Provo and BYU got them 24-21 for the 3rd straight win for the Cougars over the Utes in this rivalry series. And so part of me wondered at that point, after Utah suffering their second loss, like, okay, if we look at the landscape of the rest of the season, what realistically is on the table? Because it did feel like for a moment, I'll just speak for myself, and I'm sure a lot of Ute fans up here in Salt Lake City, it felt like for a hot minute there, everything was kind of off the table. And all of the preseason hype and expectations, and the expectations were through the roof. And certainly that has been the case as a result of what Coach Witt has built up here. He's kind of spoiled all of us where we expect greatness every single year. Ute fan, when it comes to the modern day and age of cheering for this football team, it's a much different thing as a result of the great seasons that we've seen Coach Witt have. Now, the past couple of years, we all know the deal. They've been overridden as a result of tremendous health issues and injury issues and quarterback issues, and whether it's Cameron's inability to stay healthy or Utah's lack of contingency in the case that he went out, past couple of years have not felt the same. And I think Coach Witt would tell you that himself. In fact, he has on a number of different occasions. But to start the year, there was a lot of optimism about the new quarterback, about Devin Dampier, about a new offensive coordinator. and a grip of new players coming in here that we thought would kind of solidify the thing. And for a while, it looked like we had something pretty exciting, right? But after the Tech loss, after the BYU loss, a lot of despondency up here in the market, a lot of people believing that maybe we would have been sold a bill of goods. But as we continue to talk about, despite the two losses, and as you started to dig into the criteria that the College Football Playoff Committee themselves were telling us they were going to use, you started to realize, like, wait a second, if they're telling us the truth, and if these advanced metrics and numbers are accurate, even though there are two losses on the slate, there's a chance this thing could look a little bit differently when it's all said and done than I think most people believed after the BYU loss. So Tuesday night, CFP rankings come out. You guys know the deal by now. BYU at 7, Texas Tech at 8, Utah at 13. And what has transpired as we've had now a little time, little compound interest, little patience, let's kind of wait to see what sort of hand we've been dealt. The Big 12 is not unlike the Big 10 and the SEC in being a little bit top-heavy. How much depth is there? There's a lot more depth in the SEC than there is in the Big 10 or the Big 12. I think that's fair to say, and I do not believe there's an SEC bias the way most people do. I do believe that TV partners lean into the coverage of the leagues that they're partners with more so than leagues they don't necessarily have a financial interest in. That's called capitalism, and we live in America, and that's part of doing business. But BYU, Texas Tech, and Utah, by far, the best teams in this conference. And as I said yesterday, there is a Grand Canyon-type gap between whoever you think the number 3 team is. If we go off the CFP rankings, that number 3 team would be Utah. And if you think it's Cincinnati, if you think Cincinnati is the 4th best team in this conference, all you need to review is what happened up here in Salt Lake last week. I was at the game. It did not feel like a fair fight. If you were an uninformed college football fan, you would have had no clue that Cincinnati was a top 25 football team. You would have had no clue that Cincinnati had won 7 straight games. Utah curb stomped them. They blew the brakes off them. It was over by halftime, right? So if we operate off this premise, which, as we do every single year, I talk a lot about observation, not conclusion early on, because it's hard to know exactly how things are going to unfold. Every year, there are injuries. Every year, there are coaching changes. There are schematic changes. There are simply underperformance because these are young people, and it's always hard to try to analyze how they're going to react when the lights go on. It's one thing to play well in practice. It's one thing to play well in spring ball. It's one thing to play well in a glorified scrimmage. It's another thing to play well when it's game time, and it's even a different thing to play well when there's a ton on the line, which is where Bear Bachmeier, this freshman quarterback for BYU, gets a ton of credit at that age to be able to do what he's done, regardless of what you think about luck being on BYU's side. And let's be clear, it has been on BYU's side. I am very comfortable holding 2 thoughts in my head at the same time, where BYU is both very good and also very fortunate. Brian Santiago, BYU's athletic director, joined us during Big 12 Media Day, and I appreciated and respected his candor when he said we cannot necessarily rely on all of the things that went our way last year that typically go the way of both teams. Well, all due respect to Brian, who I like an awful lot, he was wrong because they continued to rely on a lot of those things. They can both be good, opportunistic, and a little bit fortunate, right? It's a well-coached team. They passed every test. The last true freshman quarterback to start the year 8-0 in P4 is Trevor Lawrence, who went on to win a national championship. I'm not saying BYU is going on to win a national championship, but what I do feel comfortable saying is this is potentially the biggest game in the history of BYU football. Potentially. Now, the reason I say potentially is it depends on what happens after this. It could be the biggest game in BYU history depending on what BYU does after this. There's the Michigan win in '84. There's the Holiday Bowl win that allowed them to win a national championship. Those are ancient times. That was an archaic system. There are several reputable college football people that always look at that national title with a little bit of a side eye. Now, I am a scoreboard guy. You handle your business, you should win championships. It's why when the book is written on Utah football history, we'll look at 2004, we'll look at 2008, and we'll say, wait a second, how do you exist in a sport where you can win every game and not hang a banner? What sort of sport has that dynamic where every challenge you have, if you pass that challenge, it's still not enough to win a championship. Like, it made no sense then. It makes no sense now, but it's a different reality here when it comes to what BYU has in front of them. And that is an opportunity, in my opinion, to stamp their way to the college football playoff if they win tomorrow. I believe the winner of BYU Texas Tech is going to the CFP. Not just the Big 12 championship game. I think the winner of this game tomorrow is going to the college football playoff. Now, are there other challenges ahead for Brigham Young? Sure there are. TCU at home, that's going to be a sneaky game. Like, TCU is a few breaks away from being one of the top teams in the conference, and they could put points on the board. And this is one of those sneaky scenarios, and we talked about this for Brigham Young. Remember last year, BYU rolls up here. They beat Utah in the rivalry game, and then they lose 2 straight. Like, that Kansas game last year in Provo was so weird. Then they go to ASU, and they lose to ASU, but ASU won the league last year, so I'm not bringing that up as some sort of hole in what BYU did a year ago. Now, BYU was able to overcome the, quote, Utah rivalry game hangover, but it didn't look like it at the start. And this is one of the calling cards of this BYU team. They have been down double digits 4 times on their schedule, and they've been able to find their way back in. That game was 24-10. The game against Iowa State was 24-10, and LJ Martin goes out. I don't think I'm alone by thinking, oh, okay, it happened again. The rivalry week hangover got BYU again. They came back. They got it done. They actually left no doubt. They utilized, again, some good fortune and some excellent opportunistic play on their part to beat Iowa State. So the Texas Tech game now looms very, very large, and you've got to make sure that no matter what happens tomorrow, you maintain a high level of play because TCU could sneak up on you. And then you're at Cincinnati, okay? So, again, there are a lot of people around the landscape of college football that would tell you by most measurable metric or whatever you value, Cincinnati is the 4th best team in the league. I said this yesterday. I'm going to repeat it. And obviously, the Cincinnati game is a couple of weeks away. BYU, by Kalani's own admission on this radio show, is built very much the way Utah football is. And they play very similar to the way Utah football plays. They're 2 of the top 3 rushing teams in the league. They're 2 of the top 3 defenses in the league. Obviously, TCU is the other team that would fill out that holy trinity, we'll call it, on this Friday. And if Utah was able to basically make Cincinnati quit before halftime, I have a lot of confidence that BYU can do something similar. It's the TCU game that I think is a little sneaky, even though it's in Provo. But tomorrow, BYU Texas Tech, a massive game. And the one thing that Brigham Young has to just completely avoid is getting humiliated on national television, because this is an interesting dichotomy where you have a group of college football people that give BYU a ton of credit and they're due for simply being undefeated and winning every game. And then you've got the analytical guys and the folks that lean into the advanced metrics that clearly have a lot of questions left about whether or not BYU is legitimate. And you add in the fact that Vegas is yelling at us, that they think TCU is going to, or excuse me, that they think Texas Tech is going to just roll tomorrow. This is a big spot for BYU. If they can get it done, I feel like they stamp their ticket to the college football playoff. If they get absolutely smoked, I'd be a little bit concerned about what the narrative sounds like. And then the final couple of games of the season, their final game is a glorified bye against UCF, but TCU Cincinnati loom very, very large. And from a Utah standpoint, there's a lot at stake for you as well, as far as what the outcome is tomorrow. And we've talked about the tiebreaker scenarios. We'll kind of go over them in a little bit. If you're Utah, to be reductive here, you're hoping for multiple teams with 2 losses because Utah's Big 12 conference schedule has been pretty tough. And if you can get multiple team with 2 losses, you move away from the head-to-head and you go to the winning percentage against your conference opponents. And that's a dynamic that could allow Utah entrance into the Big 12 championship game. And there are several scenarios at play that actually allow Utah an at-large bid to the CFP as well. That's the good news about coming in at 13 in the CFP rankings. We'll get back to this. We're going to go live to Lubbock with Spencer Linton to give us a preview with boots on the ground. Trevor Riley is going to be live in studio for an entire hour. But on a Friday afternoon, we'll start things off with our buddy Tony Jones, the triumphant return of TJ back to the market. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Don't don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. I know you guys miss him, but we're going to bring him back from time to time. He can't escape us. Longtime media member here in our market. Prior to landing on the NBA beat, Tony Jones did a little bit of everything before covering the Utah Jazz for The Athletic. And now he has relocated to Philadelphia. But like I told you, we are not letting him out of our grips. TJ, happy Friday, young man. How are you?
My guy, what's up?
Well, we're busy, man. We're busy. I mean, it's we're right in the mix of college football season. You know what I mean? So we've got both Utah and BYU squarely in the mix to potentially, win the Big 12 championship, and maybe both of them could move on to the CFP. At least that's what we're hoping.
Well, I mean, big game tomorrow in BYU land. Utah should, if they know what they're doing, they should get to 10-2 pretty easy, and then then obviously it's about who wins and who loses down the stretch in the Big 12. But obviously, all eyes on the country are in Lubbock tomorrow because that's probably the game of the weekend right there so far.
Tell me what you think as you've watched BYU. We'll do some. I want to talk Alex Jensen. I want to talk AJ DeBonsa. I do want to do some Jazz and want to check in on you as well. But since we're in the space, it's been a really interesting kind of dynamic to analyze BYU. The advanced metrics don't love them. Vegas has put this as a 10.5-point spread in the way of Texas Tech. Yuck. Yeah, Kalani and Jay and A-Rod, they find ways to win. These kids believe in the process. They believe in their staff. They're 19-2 in their last 21. I'm completely fine, Tony, saying they're really good, but also really lucky. What say you as you've watched them, not just this year, but the past couple of years?
Well, first thing, I think they win tomorrow because, their level of physicality on both ends of the ball is ridiculous. And, then for the first time, since I can remember watching BYU, they actually have defensive backs who can run. And I think that's a huge thing. But obviously, the story of BYU is Barrett Bachmeier. And, to be honest, I'm reaching for the angels when I say this. And, I don't want to be blasphemic or anything, but he kind of reminds me of Tim Tebow. So, and I'm talking about like good Tim Tebow, not like Denver Broncos Tim Tebow. I'm talking Florida Tim Tebow. So, I mean, it makes sense that they've gotten this far. Trenches win, and every game that I've seen from BYU this year, including the Utah game. They've pretty much whipped up on every opponent up front, and I think that they're going to win up front tomorrow against Texas Tech. So it's going to be really interesting, to see what they do tomorrow against an elite opponent in a road atmosphere. Obviously, they did get the Iowa State game. I just think they were better in Iowa State. This is a like opponent in a road atmosphere, So obviously, you kind of give 2 or 3 points either way. It was the same thing with Utah and going down to Provo. I mean, it was a like opponent in the road atmosphere, But the home opponent, if it's a like opponent, probably gets a couple points there. So it'll be interesting to see now that the roles were reversed, how BYU handles that as well. But, I just think that, they've been a great team so far, and, we'll see if they can keep it going.
Utah's on a bye, and then they've got 3 pretty winnable games, and they're rolling, Tony. I mean, I don't know if they needed a bit of a wake-up call, and maybe BYU provided that. I don't know if the competition hasn't been great. I mean, Cincinnati rolled in here as a top 25 team, and I was there at the game. It was over at halftime. They come in at 13 in CFP rankings, which is 4 spots higher than in 17, which is where they're at in the AP. There are several pathways for them to either get back in the mix to qualify for the Big 12 championship game or even make the CFP as an at-large team. Now they're going to need a little help. But here's my question for you before we get to some hoops. A lot of people that are more connected than I am believe this is the last dance for Witt. And I don't know if it is. I had him on the show prior to the BYU game, and I gently alluded to the possibility. And he entertained the question in a way that he wouldn't prior to, where he basically just said, I don't want to overstay my welcome. If this is it for him, you had a front row seat, you covered the team. What should Ute fans, what should the sentiment be if Coach Witt does decide to walk out that door at the end of the year?
They should probably name the stadium after him at some point. He got this, he ushered this program to, he had a head start, right? Because the 2014 was truly special. So, Urban got him off to a head start, but, he got that program to elite WAC program status. They started at the very, very bottom of the Pac-12. If you're a Utah fan, it's interesting how time flies, because we're talking about 13 years ago. So, there are probably genuinely, Utah fans who are at the University of Utah right now who don't really remember what that 2012 team was like, but there was no talent on that team. There was just no talent. Or do we remember John Hayes? Do we remember? We remember that era.
Of course,
this was subpar Pac-12 talent in the Pac-12 conference, and he made that program one of the 3 or 4 best programs in that conference. And and if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for him getting that program to where it was, we could be talking Washington State right now. We could be talking Oregon State right now. Yeah, we could be talking, a team without a program without a conference. I think, Kyle Whittingham both saved Utah football, and he's gotten Utah football set up for, years and years and years into the future. If you're a BYU fan, obviously Kalani Sitake coached under Kyle Whittingham. If you're a Utah State fan, Gary Anderson coached under Kyle Whittingham. The coaches that he spawned, Brian Johnson making it almost all the way to the top, making it to the offensive coordinator level in the NFL. The players that he spawned in terms of, getting to the NFL and thriving to the NFL. He's turned Utah into defensive back factory. He's just been an amazing coach, an amazing statesman, and an amazing ambassador for the human race in the state of Utah. I mean, he's been one of the best, and one of the biggest people in the state over the last 20 years. So you can't say enough good things about him if he decides that this is it. Selfishly, I hope he doesn't, because you don't want to see a legend go. But if he does, then, the program is in good hands with Morgan Scalley.
So let's move over and do a little college basketball here, Tony, before we get to the Jazz and some NBA. And we saw the first game of the Alex Jensen era here in Salt Lake. San Jose State rolled into town, and don't know much about San Jose State. Know plenty about Tim Miles, who coached at Colorado State and then parlayed a NCAA appearance and a 20-win season into about a 7-year stint at Nebraska, where the results were relatively mixed. But if you're a basketball fan, you know who Tim Miles is. But there was a little bit of a talent discrepancy. I think Al has upped the athleticism quotient. I think there's better talent top to bottom. I need to look, get a little bit more familiar with the team overall. The Seydou Traore kid led them in scoring with 23. Don McHenry somehow had 9 boards, 16 points, 9 boards. They were able to rebound and guard at a higher level in the second half, and they won game 1. They'll see Weber tomorrow. I continue to talk about a long game play for Al, and he's a very, as you know him, he's process-orientated. He's a win-the-day type coach like most of these guys are. But what are you expecting? Year 1, Big 12 hoops for the Utes under Al?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, that I am expecting. Number one, I expect the talent level to genuinely increase because of Rafael Chilius, and I think that the athleticism has already increased over the last year. I'm really excited about the Brown kid. I think that there are NBA scouts who are going to come to Salt Lake to see him this year. He had a really, really, really good offseason. He's a transfer from Fairleigh Dickinson. Had a really good offseason. So I think that he has a chance to actually, be a really, really good player in the Big 12. But I'm not expecting them to really make a dent at the top of the Big 12. Not this year, just because of just how amazing the conference is. I mean, this is really it's the best basketball conference in the country this year. And you look at the talent that's going to come out of this conference. Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansa, Koa Pete, just, among other people, among others. And, there's just so many good teams in this conference that it's going to be hard for Utah to really make a dent at the top of the conference. So even though, I think the talent level is going to improve, and, I think the general effectiveness of the team is going to improve, I'm not sure that the record is going to reflect that. But, the challenge for that program is to get the talent level to where, BYU has it right now. I mean, they are, AJ DeBansa is not a one-off there. They're going to consistently be in the mix for top 20, 25, top 25 McDonald's All-American level players going forward. So it's going to be a challenge for Utah to get to that point.
So like a lot of people, I was curious to tune in for BYU's opening game, Hall of Fame series in Vegas against Villanova. Out of the Big East, obviously. You and I are old school Big East fans. And, one of the things that jumped out at me early about AJ, because, over the years, you see so many highly touted and clearly very talented freshmen roll in with, like, I'm the man, and they're a little bit entitled, like Ben Simmons at LSU. And I could keep going, because a lot of these guys are so good that even if they're rolling to college, even if they were the best player on their high school team or their AAU team, when it comes to a guy like AJ, he rolls into most gyms and he's still one of, if not the best players. But he plays hard. Like, there was no entitlement with him, and he plays within the team concept. I was impressed with his strength. He was able to finish a couple of times through contact, once off the wrong foot with his right hand in a bank shot. He gets to the bucket. He gets fouled. There really is not a hole in that skill set, and he's legitimately 6'9". But as you referenced, it's, look, that's a deep basketball team. The Rob Wright kid's really talented. He didn't shoot it well, but he got to the glass over and over. Richie apparently was sick prior to tip-off, so he was kind of dealing with some stuff. And Keba Keita, to me, is going to be huge for them, even though he's 6'8". With that athleticism, his ability to block shots, change shots, and then grab boards is something they're going to need, because they struggled on the defensive glass against Nova, who has some decent size. But BYU gets it done, 71-66. So for Jazz fans, certainly interested about the potential of maybe AJ wearing a Jazz jersey. Let's get your thoughts on AJ and then your expectations for BYU year 2 under Kevin Young.
Well, I'm glad that you said that about Richie Saunders because I was watching that game and I was like, why isn't he getting more touches?
Yeah,
Like,
he
why are
was
they not
puking.
running?
He was throwing up right before
Okay,
tip.
I didn't realize that he was sick, so that explains a lot. Um, the thing about AJ, this is who he's been throughout his career. He plays hard, and he's a dog on both ends of the floor. And I can tell you right now, I think he's already rubbed off on Kaba Keita. Kaba, he's one of the nicest guys, that I've come across. And I thought, he played against Villanova. He was playing with some nasty. And I hadn't seen that out of him. I mean, obviously, the block shots and, the the lob threat, he's always done that. But he was kind of snarling and everything, like kind of like Alonzo Mourning after he used to block shot at Georgetown. And I was like, wait a minute, AJ's East Coast is rubbing off on Kaba Keita now. So, that was actually kind of fun. I've said this on Twitter a couple of times, but he reminds me of Tracy McGrady. Legit 6'9", as you say, a legit guard, just athleticism out of the planet for a 6'9" kid. I think he's going to have to tighten up the handle. I think he's going to have to tighten up the shot. But he already knows that, you play the game to spots, and, AJ plays the game to spots. To me, he has more of a pro game than a college game. So we'll see, how he adjusts to college basketball in terms of what the spacing is. It's a little bit like DJ Edgecombe, and I think that BYU fans will, when they see him next year in the spacing in the NBA, they'll kind of know what I'm saying right now. Not to say that he's not going to be a great college basketball player, because I think he's going to be, but his game is kind of made for NBA spacing. But the thing that I was impressed with is that he tried really hard to play within the team concept. He tried, really hard to kind of blend in with his teammates, mesh with the offense, make the right reads, make the right looks. And I was really impressed because, he honestly doesn't have to do that. Nobody would complain if he just went rogue for 40 minutes. But then, he picked his spots, and then he was assertive when he needed to be. And, he was, he kind of took over the offense when he needed to, or tried to take over the offense when he needed to. So, Villanova, Kevin Willard is a heck of a coach. And he employs some great defensive concepts, so I think, that was a really good first test for him, especially for a first game. But, I was really impressed with him. And, I thought that BYU struggled for a lot of that game as a team, because, like I said, Willard is such a good coach. And, I think we remember Ralph Willard, and that's his son, and he's turned out to be just pretty much as good a coach as his father. So I thought that some of the struggles were expected. I think Richie being sick, now that makes a lot of sense. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they play going forward, because they have a pretty brutal non-conference schedule, and then the conference is going to be brutal as well. So, they're ranked 8th coming into the season. They're going to have to earn that ranking every night, because, they're not going to be the Lindo Inge that could. Teams are going to give them their best shot when they see them. They're not going to sneak up on anybody like they did last year.
So you referenced the Koa Peak kid, and one of the best basketball games of the early season was that Arizona Florida game. And, I think a lot of people who follow the sport know who Darren Peterson is. And I'm sure Green Bay Phoenix was not much of a challenge, but Darren Peterson had a smooth, easy 21 points in 22 minutes for the Jayhawks against Green Bay Phoenix. And then, we've talked a lot about Cam Boozer, 15 points, 13 boards against Texas as Duke won that game. But I was really, really impressed with Koa Pete. 30 points, 7 boards, 5 assists in 36 minutes in that win over Florida, who, of course, is the defending national champ. Does it feel like it's Darren Peterson, it's Boozer, it's AJ, and Koa Pete? Is it fair to say that feels like the top 4 prospects in the country this year?
I wouldn't have Koa Pete 4. I would have Nate Ament 4, or Mikel Brown 4. Probably Nate Ament and Mikel Brown 4 and 5. Caleb Wilson from North Carolina. Jaden Quintonich from Kentucky. Kareem Lopez, who's a kid from Brazil that's played in Australia for a couple of years. They're in that 5, 6, 7. I probably have Koa Pete around 8 or 9 or 10, which tells you how good this draft is. That we're looking at a Koa Pete like talent, probably as the 8th or 9th best player in the draft. And I just realized I hadn't even counted Kristen Ack from Houston, who's a terrific big man that a lot of Big 12 teams Big 12 fans will be able to see this season. This is, I said this last year to you when we were talking Jazz, but this might be the best draft that I've seen since 2003, and it's an amazing class. Koa Pete, I've been watching him since he was a sophomore in high school. Supremely skilled at 6'8". Is really filled out, has an NBA body, can, play from the three-point line and can play out to the three-point line, can put the ball on the floor. He's really one of those Larry Johnson type power forwards that you kind of really don't see come along anymore. So that's, he's kind of unique in that way. He's going to absolutely destroy college basketball because of the way the game is. There just aren't many guys that can guard that kind of guy anymore. And, I think he's going to be a first-team All-American, just because there are just not many guys left that can guard a Koa Pete type of guy. I don't know how that's going to translate into the NBA, where there's more spacing, and and your fours have to play a little bit more out on the floor. I do think that he's going to be extremely productive at the NBA level. I just think that he might be kind of, I don't want to say outdated, but kind of like an old school archetype, if that means something, at the NBA level. But at the college level, he is going to be absolutely sensational. And, and I think that, he's going to be a lottery pick for sure.
TJ, before I set you loose, because we're up against it with the clock, I do want to get a Jazz thought from you. Walker Kessler sadly lost for the year. And ultimately, you're really bummed for Walker because he's probably going to lose millions of dollars as a result of this injury. The Jazz elected not to extend him. The early returns, I think the team is a little bit more entertaining than it was a year ago. All of the offseason buzz about Keontae so far seems to be more or less real. They're 3-5, and no one's expecting a high level of winning. I think we just want to see a direction. What are your thoughts, early returns with the Utah Jazz?
Yeah, I think that, there is a direction, and, and I think that, there's kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel. As bummed as you have to be for Walker, I kind of think that that's it's uh, a blessing in disguise for the Jazz because I think that they were going to have to fight some demons with Walker healthy in order to lose the way they need to lose this year. Because they have that pick from Oklahoma City. They have to finish in the top 8 of the lottery to keep the pick. They absolutely need to keep the pick this year because of how good this draft is. And, but I can tell you that the new direction of the front office, there are a lot of people in the front office who did not want to tank this year. Win or lose, they wanted to just go out and play this year. So I think that, Walker's injury probably, a vehicle for the front office to let this team go out and play as hard as they need to play and as hard as the front office wants them to play, but to still have the losing at a high level. Because I think if Walker were healthy, Walker affects winning so much that I think that this group could have won 35 games with him healthy. But without him healthy, I think they're going to win 10 less games. They're going to be 25 and 57, and they'll get anywhere between, the first and the sixth or seventh pick in the draft, and they'll be able to keep the pick, make one last lottery pick and try to be as competitive as possible going forward beginning next year.
Tone, always appreciate the time, man. Hope all is well with you. If you ever come back this way, you better hit me up, all right?
I'm going to come back this way. Come on now.
I know you will. We just miss you, buddy. That's all. Hope you're doing well, okay?
I miss you guys too, man. Utah, I miss you a lot. So I just wanted to say that.
That's our guy, Tony Jones from The Athletic. Covered the Jazz here for a number of years, and now he's back in Philadelphia. And, of course, we'll bring him on the show so you guys can get your Tony Jones fix because I know that's what you want. We'll catch a break. We're going to go live to Lubbock. Coming up next, we'll catch up with Spencer Litton to preview BYU and Texas Tech. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. We're going to bring in Trevor Riley today, former Ute, live in studio during the 4 o'clock hour. Little known fact, Trevor was recruited by Mike Leach to play college football at Texas Tech in Lubbock. And I believe we go live to Lubbock now, boots on the ground, correct? Spencer Litton, BYU TV. How are you, my friend?
Let's go. And you remembered my lead-up song, Spence. Can I tell you how much I appreciate your attention to detail with Rage Against the Machine?
You know, I'm all about the walk-up songs on this program. And when my guy Martin, who's filling in, asked me, what is Spencer's walk-up song, I remember that you like a little Rage. We're close to the same age. Nothing gets you through the end of a workout like a Rage song.
It's so true. And I need it for my workout in Lubbock. Yes, boots on the ground, bro. Just hanging out in my hotel room. Just got back from campus and kind of taking in the sights and sounds of ESPN College Game Day and their setup, and did a live hour show myself in front of the stadium for the Red Raiders. And yeah, the scene is, it's hype. No doubt about it. Texas Tech fans are confident, understandably so, with that defense and the way things are going for them. But yeah, this is a unique deal, to say the least. The build-up and the eyeballs and College Game Day, and the fact that BYU gets the prime treatment with a lead-in to the game from College Game Day of sorts, and Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit on the call. It's a huge day for the conference, frankly, just to hopefully show out and put on a competitive, fun product.
Yeah, first top 10 matchup in conference play in a number of different years. And I've been trying to provide a little context here, and I'm just going to let you do it for me. And it's weird to talk about this with a program that's won a national championship and that's won a grip of conference titles and has had a lot of big wins, both in bowl games and the regular season. Could this be the biggest game in the history of BYU football? Is there any chance that it is?
It's crazy that we are having that conversation, and a totally fair question by you and everyone else. I know that sometimes we get lost in the moment and caught up in recency bias, but the fact that BYU has never played a game where they have been ranked in the top 10 and the opponent has been ranked in the top 10 ever is wild. So that alone puts it into an upper echelon. And I think the closest BYU's ever been to that is probably the Cotton Bowl, when BYU was number 5 and Kansas State was number 14, or maybe even in 1986 when BYU was 11th and Washington was number 7. But it's crazy. Like, even the best BYU-Utah game as far as rankings go was in 08, when that Utah team was so tough, and I think they were number 8 and BYU's number 16. Point is, it hasn't ever happened this way. So the fact that it's the first ever top 10 showdown on both sides in BYU history takes it there. Now, if BYU loses this game, I know that BYU fans are going to be like, well, that definitely wasn't one of the biggest games ever. But it still should be. It's still, just because of all of the eyeballs and everything this means to both schools and the conference. And BYU is now in a Power 4 conference for just the third year. And just the moment seems very, very big. Now, if BYU wins this game, gosh, like the hype will go to another stratosphere. And then the conversation about BYU being a legitimate college football playoff team and a potential Big 12 champion definitely gains a lot of validity. But if I'm pulling back the curtain fully, I think BYU should feel confident going in with 2 weeks of preparation and getting some rest and some key players back. But I do totally understand why they are a clear underdog here. Now, 10.5 feels like a lot, but if this game ended 31-21, would anybody be surprised in favor of Texas Tech? No. I just hope that for BYU's sake and the conference's sake, the Cougars can show up with that additional preparation and put a good product on the field and not have it turn into this runaway like it did at Rice-Eccles. Because I think it's a little unfair to Utah. Like, most people don't remember, it was a 3-point game with 8 minutes left in the game, was it not? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, it was close, so I hated that the score was lopsided because it didn't feel like it was that game the entire time.
Yeah, it was a rock fight until it wasn't. And that's just, I mean, the final score is the final score. And your fear is the college football committee just looks at that score, or college football playoff committee just looks at that score and says they romped them. But I don't think they did, because Utah You know what the committee told us on Tuesday, Spencer, is they like BYU and they like Texas Tech, and therefore they like Utah too because they're not penalizing them for those two losses. So just kind of like it felt like they looked at Tech's loss without their starting quarterback and ASU with Sam Levitt and said, okay, we're not necessarily going to penalize you too much. So, yes, the final score is the final score. You can't run from that. But I don't think Utah has been penalized on a super punitive level because the committee said they like BYU and Texas Tech as well.
Yeah, yes. And I thought it was fascinating when Utah showed up at number 13. Immediately, I was thinking, okay, well, clearly the analytics are so good on Utah, and Utah has been so dominant in their wins outside of the two losses to Texas Tech and BYU that this is great. This is great for the conference. Yeah, you'd like to have more teams from the Big 12 in the top 25, but if your three are number 13, number 8, and number 7, gosh, and compared to the ACC, are you kidding me? That was about as great as any Big 12 fan or even BYU Utah fans could have hoped for with pushing to the CFP. Because I don't know how you feel, Spence, so I'm going to throw a question back at you, but like there's a legitimate case that if Utah just continues to dominate the way that they have in their remaining games and they win big and they take care of business against Baylor and Kansas State and hold serve there, and then let's say BYU loses a close game to Texas Tech, but then they win out and Texas Tech wins out. Like we're talking about a scenario where all three teams could be ranked in the top 11 or 12, and now we're not just feeling good about getting two Big 12 teams into the playoff bracket. There's an outside shot that all three could, if that scenario that I presented happens. Now, how likely is that? I don't know. And that's where my question is for you. How likely of that scenario playing out do you feel like is a thing right now?
Well, not super likely, but the fact that it's mid-November and we can talk about all of them in the mix is a really, really good sign because last year the first iterations of the CFP rankings come out and we're all kind of like, oh, dude, they don't like the Big 12. They're telling us that the Big 12 champ is in and that's all. And the fact that we have three teams legitimately in the mix is an excellent sign. So, you know, the other thing that would certainly have to add, like Texas has a couple of really tough games and, you know, there are a lot of Texas doubters. The nice thing about, you know, people get up in arms about the first iteration of the CFP. So if you think Texas is a fraud, they will be exposed. If you think they're legit, they're going to play their way in. Oregon has a couple of tough challenges. You know, so like if Oregon, Texas, maybe Notre Dame, if they stumble a little bit and Utah continues to, because I think Utah is going to finish 10-2, barring some catastrophic stubbing of the toe. So if they can move up, you know, as a result of teams in front of them, of course, losing and compare that to, you know, Utah handling their business. And then BYU, Texas, like the only thing Brigham Young has to avoid tomorrow, Spencer, is just getting their brakes blown off. Right? Like
100%.
If it's 34-31 and Tech kicks like a game-winning field goal with 30 seconds left, I think the only thing you might see is like a flip next week where BYU's 8 and Texas Tech is 7. The only thing BYU has to avoid is what happened last year when they went 2-2 down the stretch and then getting absolutely smoked by Tech. Because here's the other thing, and I want you to tell me why you think this is. There are advanced metrics that continue to have serious questions about BYU. S&P Plus, Texas Tech 4, Utah 6, BYU is at 16. Football Power Index, you know, Utah 7, Texas Tech 11, BYU 14. So the advanced metrics continue to like Utah. Now, I say this all the time. The nice thing about sports is we have a scoreboard, right? And so if you like Utah, then BYU beat them, and that's the bottom line. But why do you and then Vegas is telling us that they like Texas Tech 10.5. Why do you think there continues to be questions about BYU even though they're clean?
When you win a bunch of close games and you have to rally late in several of those games, it sometimes can hurt your quality score, if you will, and your game control. I know that's a big metric in SP Plus and some other things. And the game control by Utah and Texas Tech has been outstanding, outside of the one loss Tech has and the two losses that Utah has, rather. BYU has trailed by double figures in all 3 of their road Big 12 games this season and won them, to their credit. But that hurts metrics. It just does. When you're winning close games, metrics don't typically like that. I know that the strength of record is a thing too, and that actually favors BYU, but that's the outlier. Like, not many of the numbers, especially the ones you brought up, are like, yay, BYU. Still solid, but they're not on par with Tech and Utah. I did speak with Reese Davis yesterday, and I asked him a similar question that you asked me, which is, okay, why is BYU so heavily outweighed here against Texas Tech and even in those metrics? And he brought up the same thing I said, close games. Sometimes people start to think like you're hanging on and you're a weak team, but he offered this retort. He said there's still power in a team being able to figure it out. Like, good, if not great teams, just figure out a way to win games. And there is power in that, because when you get into dogfight or a rock fight, it's like, yeah, we're going to figure it out. We're going to win this game. Like, that confidence and that belief, it carries some weight. So he said, don't get so caught up in the, gosh, BYU's hanging on for dear life. They're going to get burned. It's going to sting. And like, how much more luck can they take on in this thing? He's like, I don't view it as necessarily luck outside of maybe a game or two in this, 19 wins of the last 21 that BYU's had. I value the culture and the belief and the toughness more than I do like, well, BYU's just lucky. So I appreciated that take, and I think that there is some value in it. But if BYU takes this trailing by double digits in the second half on the road at Texas Tech, I don't think that is sustainable in this game. It would take something special for them to have to rally again. I think they're going to have to hang around and keep it close, probably within single digits for a majority of the game, if they want to try and make it weird and sneak out of Lubbock with a win. So, but hopefully a competitive game helps BYU in some of the metrics you're talking about, even if it does end in a loss to Tech.
Well, sometimes the way we talk about this stuff, like, you have to take one lane or the other, and that's not how I approach it. It's not how I do the show. And, during Big 12 Media Days, we had Brian Santiago on the show, and I actually was a little bit taken back, but very much appreciated his candor when he said, look, how long can we rely on things going our way? How long can rely? Like, he was very forthcoming about what he perceived to be some very lucky bounces a year ago. And the answer is to how long it can go your way. It's continued this year. I think it's fine saying that BYU is both very good and has been somewhat fortunate at times. But here's the thing. I've grown up around sports my whole life, been in the media space for 20 years, grew up in the pro sports landscape. I have never seen a team win a championship without a little luck on their side. That's how this works. It's okay to say out loud that BYU is very good and very well coached. There's nothing fluky about 19-2. You can't spin that any other way. But, the muffed punt off the foot, there's certain things that seem, look, it just seems to be this thing where Kalani and this staff and this team and this program, they're kind of on a little bit of a magical ride where a lot of things have gone their way. And I think that's okay to say out loud. Yes.
Team of destiny. That phrase often gets brought up when those bounces, the Iowa State scenario where Rocco Beck just throws an interception right to Logan Latui. I mean, what do you call that? You're just like, dude, where are you throwing that ball? But it's a huge break for BYU, and there was a momentum shift there, and there was a momentum shift in the back heel kick, and Iowa State dropped a pass that was going to be a touchdown. Like, yes, like that game specifically, I thought to myself, wow, it really does feel like something magic is in the air for BYU. And to BYU's credit, they still have to go make plays. Parker Kingston has to go and snag a ball out of the air and score a touchdown, and Faleta Satuala has to, pull off an amazing pick six where the ball's in the Iowa State offensive player's hands. He just rips it out and runs the other direction. So there is, let's give credit to the guys going to make plays when and be opportunistic. But yes, I agree with you. Sometimes there are just lucky bounces, and it feels like BYU's had more of those than not over the last 2 years. And I think it's going to take a few more of those tomorrow in Lubbock for BYU to be in this conversation. I'll add this. My co-host on BYU Sports Nation, Jerem Jordan, brought up this morning. BYU's played 30 games all time against top 10 competition, at least that we've gathered in the modern era where stats have been kept and rankings have been held. And the record's not great. I think BYU's 6 wins, 23 losses, and 1 tie in those 30 games. In the 6 wins BYU has had against those top 10 teams, never has BYU scored in the 30s, and never has an opponent scored more than 21 against BYU when the Cougars won that game. So needless to say, it feels like if BYU wins this game tomorrow, they're going to need a few bounces and breaks and turnovers and giveaways by Texas Tech, and it will probably be a 27-24 game, 28-21 type game, or even a 24-23 scenario where there's a walk-off field goal. It feels a lot like that's what's going to have to happen. I'll add to that. Texas Tech, the one loss they had this year against Arizona State, only one time all year have they given up more than 24 points, and it was that game. Arizona State was the only team to score more than 24 against Texas Tech. So there are your numbers for victory, if you will.
Yeah, look, man, with all the things that have fallen into place, if you attach your faith to football, then faith precedes the miracle. How firm a foundation, whatever you want to say, man. Like folks have to be all in. Let's get church back to 3 hours if this is going to happen with BYU football. That's where I'm at with it. Hey, I know you got to go. So before you do, you be quick if you need to. But BYU wins tomorrow morning, Spencer. If what?
3 big keys for me. They have to be even or better in the turnover margin. I don't see a scenario where against that Wreckham Tech defense, if BYU isn't even or better in the turnover margin, that they can win this game on the road. Texas Tech has forced 20 turnovers. It's crazy. They're punching the ball like crazy. So BYU's got to protect the ball and be even there. Secondly, BYU has to run effectively enough to set up the play action pass where they have been so good. Like Bear Bachmeier is at his best when the play action is it's a thing that Aaron Rodgers can go to in his playbook. If BYU can't run the ball, and Texas Tech has given up 75 rushing yards per game, which is an insane number. If BYU can't run for at least 100 yards, if not 120 yards, then the play action is not really going to work. And that takes away a huge contingent of what Aaron Roderick wants to do with Bear Bachmeier in the pass game. So you got to run it effectively enough. And the third is, can BYU get off the field on third down? Texas Tech's converting, I think, 50% or maybe a hair over that of their third downs this year. If BYU can't get Texas Tech off the field on third down at least a 40% clip, meaning like Texas Tech is only converting on 40% or fewer of their third downs, gosh, that's going to hurt BYU too. So those are my 3 keys to victory, if you will. And I just hope it's an exciting, competitive game. Like with all the buildup, you just want good college football, and that's what I want more than anything tomorrow. It's for it to be a close, exciting game.
All right, buddy. Well, we'll set you loose. Enjoy it. This is what makes our jobs fun. So enjoy the moment and travel safe, okay?
No doubt about it, brother. Appreciate you. Talk to you again soon.
All right, Spencer Litton, BYU TV, a massive game for Brigham Young tomorrow. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say it's potentially the biggest game in BYU's history. And yes, this is a program that has won a national championship back in the day. I think it was the Michigan win that kind of solidified them, Holiday Bowl win, getting that natty. It makes it weird to say that this could potentially be it. Now, as I said earlier, in a vacuum, it is easy to say this is as big of a game that BYU has played in their history, certainly as big of a game as they played in the modern era, we'll call it the post-Lavelle era of BYU football, but it's contingent upon what happens afterwards if they are able to get this done. Now, this is a tough task. Texas Tech, I believe they're the only team in the country that is a top 5 team on offense and on defense. Utah is one of 4 teams in the country to be in the top 10 on offense and on defense. BYU is in the top 20 in both. And what BYU does well is run the football, right? Just like Utah. When you look at their ranks as far as rushing yards per game, this is just conference rankings. Utah is 1 at 267.1 yards. I believe Utah is the best rushing team in P4. And then BYU is at 2 at 216.6 yards. Texas Tech is actually at 3. But if you move over to the defensive rankings, this is somewhat stunning because Texas Tech isn't just the best run defense in the Big 12. They're the best run defense in the country. But as far as conference rankings go, rushing defense, yards allowed per game, Texas Tech 74.6. That's 56 yards between them and the second place team, which ironically enough is TCU at 120 yards allowed per game. BYU is the number 4 rush defense in the conference, 129.4 yards allowed. Utah, by the way, is down at 7, 144 yards allowed. So it goes Tech, TCU, Arizona State, BYU, Houston, Arizona, and Utah. But this comes down to whether or not Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin and that offensive line is able to handle what is probably not just the most talented defensive front in the Big 12, but one of the most talented defensive fronts in college football. David Bailey, Romello Height, 2 NFL guys on the end. The Martinez kid at linebacker is one of the best players in the country. He's going to be the finalist for the Butkus Award for sure. Texas Tech clearly has the respect of college football. And I'm talking about on every single level and every single metric. Like we talked to Spencer about the advanced metrics that value Utah over BYU and, simply the college football playoff rankings that value BYU over any team in the Big 12. Texas Tech is the one team of the 3, and this has become a conference that's dominated by the Big 3, if we're very clear. It is BYU, Utah, and Texas Tech in whatever order you want to put them in. But Texas Tech is the one team among all 3 teams where every metric ranks them as elite. You can't find one that doesn't rank them as elite. And by elite, I mean one of the top 7 or 8 teams in the country legitimately. Advanced metrics believe Utah is one of the top 7 teams in the country. Most of them do. But the CFP rankings have Utah at 13. The CFP rankings have BYU at 7, but the advanced metrics believe they're more like 15 or 16. Texas Tech, among the Big 3, is as close as we have to a consensus elite football team in the Big 12. This is a tough ask for BYU. On the road, early kick, traveling a time zone. I think they're more or less healthy. The reports are LJ Martin is going to play. I think Jack Kelly is healthy or healthy enough to give it a go. So the Martinez kid on Texas Tech, probably the best linebacker, not just in the conference, maybe the country. But Isaiah Glasgow, Jack Kelly as a combo might be the best linebacking combo in the Big 12. So big game. Of course, Utes on a bye, so a lot of eyes on this BYU-Texas Tech game. We'll kind of see how it goes down. College Game Day will be live in Lubbock. It is the second straight week College Game Day has been involved in a Big 12 game. Of course, they were here in Salt Lake last week as Utah just took it to Cincinnati. And now a bye week for the Utes, but a big weekend ahead, both in the national college football landscape and the Big 12 overall. Don't forget, Trevor Riley's going to be live in studio for an entire hour. Trevor was recruited by Mike Leach to play a little college football at Texas Tech. He decided to come to Utah, so he's familiar with both programs. We'll get his take on Tech BYU and where he thinks Utah is currently in the college football landscape, and we'll talk about the pathways ahead for Utah to either qualify for the Big 12 championship or potentially get into the CFP as an at-large team. We'll do a little golf, though, coming up on the other side. Our guy Paul Pugmire stops by. Don't forget, we are going to say goodnight to Sco Shirley as the Utah women are taking on Utah State and Logan. Pregame coverage at 5:45, and then tip is at 6 o'clock. Busy show on a Friday. Happy Friday to you. Happy weekend to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Trevor Riley will join us live in studio. Coming up during the 4 o'clock hour, we are going to get you ready for a massive game. It is BYU Texas Tech with Utah on a bye. We'll talk some big picture Big 12. And even though Utah's on a bye, the current state of Utah football, Utah athletics, don't forget, we are going to send you over to pregame coverage for the Utah women tonight. Utah women's hoops taking on Utah State. Our pregame coverage will begin at 5:45 with tip-off at 6. So we'll say goodnight just a little bit early this evening. Started things off with Tony Jones for a little college hoops and some jazz basketball. Live in Lubbock, Spencer Litton stopped by to give us a preview of tomorrow's big game. But the host of our dynamic golf show, it is a dynamic golf show, Utah Golf Radio, every Saturday, is Paul Pugmire, and he joins us on a Friday afternoon. Hello, Paul. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Spence. How are you doing?
I'm good. So this will not surprise you. I've been kind of dialed into football and basketball, and it is kind of the off season in the world of golf right now. So I just wanted to ask you, what's kind of catching your eye right now? What are golf fans focused on as we have moved into kind of the quiet time on the PGA Tour?
Yeah, it's the FedEx fall season right now, the fall series they call it, and it is 7 tournaments in the fall that include, that includes the Bank of Utah Championship at Black Desert a couple weeks ago. And those 7 tournaments are targeted for the players who are fighting for position outside of the top 50, fighting for their cards to be into the top 100. And so there's a lot of really interesting human stories going on right now of guys fighting for their cards, for their jobs for next year, or trying to improve their status for next year in these FedEx Fall Cup series. And what's really fun about it is that there are 2 Utah players that are certainly in that discussion, most certainly Patrick Fishburne, who currently sits at number 104 on the FedEx Cup point list. He needs to play his way into number 100 in the next this week and the next 2 weeks in order to have full status on the tour next year. And then Zach Blair, who has really taken a hit this year on his FedEx Cup standing. He's nonetheless playing these tournaments and trying to work his way up into the top 150 for Zach, really, because he needs that to get conditional status for next year. He currently sits at 167. So those are our guys who are in on this fall series, and they're the stories that are so layered and interesting. There are dozens of really great stories out there. The leader of the tournament right now down in Mexico, Nick Dunlop, he is one of these stories.
So that's let's see. We've got we're in Cabo. Why? I'd like to be there. I wouldn't mind covering this event down in Cabo. So the Worldwide Technology Championship. I will not try to pronounce the name of the golf course, but tell us about what you know about the track and why we should be paying attention to this event. It looks like there's some big names in there. I see a Ben Griffin creeping a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's names in there that are trying to get themselves into the top 60. They've missed out on the moment to make the top 50. That window closed with the Tour Championship. But they're trying to get into the top 60, and the top 60 still gets you into half of the elevated events, the signature events next year. It gets you into the Players' Championship if you don't already have a ticket to that. And so there are big-name players looking to do that. Nick Dunlop is really an interesting name. He currently leads the tournament, but he comes into it, and this is the kid who won a couple of years ago as a college junior, as an amateur. He won down in Palm Springs while on the PGA Tour while an amateur. So he took the opportunity that was given him to turn pro and to use the status that he gained with that victory, but he hasn't made much use of it. He hasn't done very well since. He currently comes into this week ranked number 145, and if he wins, it jumps him all the way to 71, which is well within the top 100, and secures his card for next year. So that's kind of interesting. This golf course is a Tiger Woods design. It is a resort course, and like many resort courses, it's got very wide, accepting fairways because it has to be not only a championship facility, but also it's got to be a place where resort travelers can play. The fairways are wide and accepting, but the green complexes are challenging. That's the nature of this kind of course. Nick Dunlop comes into this event the worst driver statistically on the PGA Tour. He hit every fairway yesterday, shot 61, and played himself into the lead. He's currently 7 under on today's round. He's continuing to play well. And so he seems to have figured out his driver at least for a day or two.
See, there's a tournament in Abu Dhabi where Tommy Fleetwood and Shane Lowry are going at it. Do any of these guys take like weeks and weeks off? I always hesitate to be the guy like, hey, when I play golf, it's a different thing for us that are normal as opposed to these guys. But I feel like if I don't swing a club for a couple weeks, I'm starting over in a way. So I understand that you want to stay, make sure the swing is taken care of and you don't want to lose form. But, with all these guys playing these tournaments who ultimately feel like they're kind of solidified with not just their status, but big time tournament wins. I mean, do any of these guys just like get gone for a while and take legitimate time off?
Yes, they do. Normally in stretches of 2, maybe 3 weeks at a time rather than longer than that. And part of the reason is exactly as you say, you don't want to be away from it too long or you lose your form. More especially, you lose the very subtle, nuanced nature of feeling in your fingers for chipping and putting for short shots. And I mean, the swings are grooved for these guys. It is staying with really precise control of the club face on little short shots. The taking longer than that, generally you don't see too much of it. For this particular week at Abu Dhabi, it is a terrific field. It's a better field. This European Tour, DP World Tour event, normally PGA Tour events are better fields, but this week certainly the DP World Tour event over in Abu Dhabi is a much better field. But a lot of those players, candidly, probably are getting appearance fees for showing up, especially this time of year. But whatever works, I'm fine with that. This is a good field over there. You've got Fleetwood and Lowry slugging it down at the top. McIlroy was lurking just a few shots back. That's fun to watch.
So there's, I don't know if it's a report or it's just a potential here, but I'm pulling up the PGA Tour page on ESPN.com, and there's a piece on the potential of Tiger playing on the Champions Tour. He turns 50 on December 30th. And obviously there's a quote from the president of the Champions Tour that's like, yeah, we'd like to have him. Oh, you don't, you don't say, sir. You don't say. I believe it's Miller Brady, who's the president of the PGA Champions Tour. I just kind of wonder what you make of this. As unfortunately, I've lost track of how many injuries and surgeries that he's had to go through. The Golf Channel did some sort of like fun little 3D thing. It's something like 29 different injuries and surgeries. So would this be an admission from a guy that is as competitive of an athlete, not just a golfer, as we'd ever seen, that it's time to move into what I'd call the fall of his storied career?
Yeah, fall is a totally apropos word. Let's go with that. And it's been an interesting progression and evolution on this particular conversation. When Tiger was in his 40s is when it first came up. And, keep in mind, he was in his 40s when he won in 2019 at Augusta. And you look back at those pictures, and there are so many things that get your attention, but one is he was cut. He was really looking strong. And the talk at the time was there's no possible way Tiger would consider the Champions Tour. It would be a step down, a diminution. It would be demeaning to him. That conversation has changed. Tiger has changed in in his interactions with certainly his peers. He's become more friendly, more collegial, more involved, and certainly with the public as well. He's become more accessible and more interactive. The other thing that's really at work here is there's two other things. First of all, exactly what you say. Who can even count the surgeries and the injuries? I can't. It's just constant. And I think that has changed Tiger's view of mortality, if you will, his view of being a part of everybody else who has aches and pains, and changed his view of what he can and cannot do. The second thing at work is I really see a progression of him wanting to be involved with his friends, his colleagues, his competitors that he grew up playing with and against. They're playing on the Champions Tour, and I think the more that he sees good friends like Ernie Els, Fred Couples, players like that playing on the Champions Tour, and them saying, come play with us, Tiger, it becomes a little more possible each day. Plus, on the Champions Tour, if a player chooses to, the player has the option of riding in a cart. And that may be simply necessary for Tiger to play, in most cases, 54 holes, so 3 days in a row, and in some cases, 72 holes, so 4 days in a row. He might need a cart in order to do it. And with that, he might say, I want to go play with my friends. I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, there could be worse things to spend your, fall and winter of your life than, either playing on the Champions Tour or just being Tiger Woods. I mean, he should enjoy, this final portion of his competitive life, no matter how it looks. Let me move over here. I told you, and I thought you were going to be mad at me, but I attended a live golf event in Indianapolis this last year.
I went to the one in Vegas this year. I wanted to see it. I think that's great.
Yeah, and it was at the invitation of Scott O'Neill, who was the president of Madison Square Garden Sports from 2008 to 2012. Scott is also a convert to the LDS faith, and my family knows him well, and so I had a chance to speak with him quite a bit, and I tried to take my media hat off. I'm not very good at that. And so I was kind of peppering him a little bit about how committed they are just to staying the course. And it's pretty clear that, not only are they looking to remain relevant, they want to grow, and they believe in their model. Now, they have made a decision to move to 72 holes, which aligns them, I believe, with just more of the traditional approach. Is this a play to get their players back in the world golf rankings mix, or what do you make of the decision by LIV to go to 72?
It's absolutely a play, a step to get world golf ranking points. It's not the step, it's a step. And I'll come back to that in a minute. It also is a reaction to the marketplace, both the marketplace of you and me out here, people who are consuming the product and talking about it, and the marketplace internally. There's a lot of talk about John Rahm putting a lot of pressure on the LIV organization to go to 72 holes. Look, we've talked about this before. 72 holes with a hard path to get in and an even harder path to stay in with a cut is the tried and true and proven format that best identifies a champion. It's not an accident that every single major championship of any kind, 72 holes with a cut, hard to get in, harder to stay in. That's a model that has proved itself. So LIV going to 72 holes absolutely is a step toward getting world golf ranking points. The bigger step will be this whole point of hard to get in, hard to stay in, relegation, a clear pathway to play your way onto the LIV Tour, and relegation, that which means to say a difficult pathway to stay on the tour. We just, at the top of this segment, we were talking about all the PGA Tour players and all the interesting stories of players trying to get that top 100 to get their status for next year so they are not relegated. And LIV doesn't have that as much. That's one thing they really need to address in order to get their world golf ranking points. And then there is another thing that so far O'Neill has said they're just not willing to talk about. and that's the shotgun start. You cannot run a championship tournament with some leaders finishing on hole A, other leaders finishing on hole B all at the same time. Cannot happen. And until they address the shotgun start, I don't think they will be fully integrated and fully able to get the world ranking points. But they are taking steps toward that, no doubt. And I do think they're getting a lot of pressure internally from their top players. Look, Jon Rahm has become largely invisible, which is sad and a loss for everybody in the game of golf by every measure. I miss seeing Jon Rahm play week to week. But it's a bed they made. I think they're trying to climb out of it step by step right now.
You know, as we look back on, I don't know, what is it, 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And, you know, when it initially came down, it elicited so much anger from so many people. And it's simple because so many people love the tour and so many people love golf. And it's like this, and I've only learned this since I started leaning into the coverage over the past few years, just how much this game and this sport means to people. And there's almost like this reverence for it in a way that if you're disruptive of it, people are just going to come at you. And so, of course, a lot of people went right at Phil right away. And then the book came out and it's like, okay, he's a gambling degenerate that needs the cash to pay off these bookies or whatever. And I don't think it was taken, I'll just speak for myself, I don't think it was taken seriously as a threat initially. And then when you really fully understand the power of the purse and the public, you know, the PIF or whatever, and the Saudis being involved and just how deep those pockets are, you started hearing these rumors that it could be this golfer, that golfer. Then suddenly DJ was the one where I was like, oh, dude, no, they're taking away like golfers that I really like to watch. And then throughout the course of the, you know, ensuing years, it's Brooks Koepka, it's Major Champions, it's Jon Rahm. And they do have a decent roster of talent at their disposal. And, you know, at the time, and Phil has kind of proven to be correct. He wanted to do this as a direct shot at the PGA Tour so they would make adjustments. And they actually have with these elevated events and bigger purses. But beyond that, is there anything LIV has that you believe is something the PGA Tour should look at? Is there anything they do that you actually think they get right that the PGA Tour does not?
When I visited the LIV event in Vegas, one thing that struck me was how absolutely superb, excellent, top-notch they were at putting on the event. It was branded, it was decorated, it was signage. The signage was so good everywhere. The experience for the fans was up there with my previous leader in the clubhouse, which was an NBA All-Star game. This is at the level of an NBA All-Star game, and they do it every single tournament. That's one thing. The other thing that LIV really has leaned into and succeeded well at is going to markets, especially international markets, that have been just so thirsty for golf and so eager to see top-level golf. And what really comes to mind is what they've done down in Australia. Now, granted, it's a brutal flight from the States to Australia, but nonetheless, that is a great market of great golf fans. There's great golf history in Australia, and LIV going there was a very masterful move. The PGA Tour should have been doing that. You hear about the possibility of a merger between LIV and the DP World Tour. That's what that will be built on, that international marketing, that international tournament staging, if that merger comes about, which I think is a distinct possibility. Those are the two things that LIV really got right. And another one comes to mind as well. In my mind, the biggest failure of the PGA Tour of ecosystem, which includes all of their developmental tours, is that developmental players can go broke. They can come away with lifelong debt, simply trying to develop themselves as a professional athlete. No other sport does that. Minor league baseball players don't get rich but they do have a salary. They can pay the rent. They can drive a car. They know they know they have an income for the year. The developmental leagues, the minor leagues of golf, don't have that. And LIV provides that for the people in their league, if you're among the very few who are able to be on a team. So LIV got that right as well.
All right, I have a random question for you, and I'm going to catch you off guard a little bit, but I want your knee-jerk reaction because I was thinking about this. I mean, it is the fall series of the PGA Tour, and, you know, there are only so many topics we can milk. So if I asked you off the top of your head, give me, I'm going to say 3 because I think 5 would be a stretch. Top 3 golfers in the history of our state. Either they have ties here, they live here, they played here. Top 3 golfers, Utah all time.
Oh, Johnny Miller, Billy Casper, and George Von Elm.
Holy smokes. Okay, then
Yeah.
then I'm going to stretch it to 5.
At 5, Dan Forsman and Mike Reed.
I don't know who these people are.
Dan Forsman, a 4-time winner on the PGA Tour.
Okay.
And he's an Arizona guy, but he married a Utah woman and settled in Utah. And Forsman is a fascinating guy. I've enjoyed so much getting to know him. He shows up very incognito and follows the final match of the State Am every year, regardless of where it is. He just walks along and sees these guys play and doesn't make a big deal about it. But when you talk to him, he says, anybody who makes it this far deserves the respect of me coming to watch him. And Dan Forsman is a great guy, 4-time winner on the PGA Tour. Mike Reed was an All-American at BYU. He was a 4 or 5-time winner on the PGA Tour, nearly won the Masters, nearly won the PGA Championship, and then ended up winning majors on the Senior Tour.
Very cool. Is Tony inching closer and closer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All 5 of those names I gave you are their careers are complete. We know exactly what their whole career is, including, especially in the case of Mike Reed, their senior tournament, their Champions Tour record, and in the case, of course, of Billy Casper and George Von Elm, they have long since passed away. Tony Finau is a young man. We don't know what his career in totality will be, but even at this young age, he is already on the page for this discussion. He's won 6 times on the PGA Tour. He has not won a major. Obviously, Von Elm, Casper, and Miller all won majors. But yeah, Tony, if you were to raise it to 6, Tony is number 6. He's knocking on the door. Can't wait to see what he does in the next few years, man. It's going to be cool.
Before we find out what is on the show tomorrow, let's get an update. And I was texting with Easton Folster about this. The Ridge Golf Course in West Valley. The Wing Point, right out at the airport. We already lost that course a number of years ago, and I'm on this quest to hashtag shrink the game. I know that I'm alone on this because I'm sick of all of these 5-hour rounds, 6-hour rounds, and the inability to get tee times. And when we lost the course out at the airport, it just made the other courses, jam-packed in a way that I think the Ridge would kind of have the same effect. We don't need less. So what's going on here, and how can our listeners get involved?
They can get involved by letting the city of West Valley, and in particular the elected officials in West Valley, know that they care and know that they don't want the Ridge closed. The city manager at City of West Valley has decided that the way he will address some budget challenges is to sell the Ridge to developers. And so, whatever that means, I mean, we know what it likely means. The Ridge is right there on the Mountain View corridor on the west side, a high growth area, one of the highest growth areas in urban environments around the world. And the land is very valuable. Yeah, it is. Well, you know what else is valuable? Central Park. Don't sell Central Park. The Ridge is, they are seriously considering, they being the elected officials and the management, the leadership of West Valley City are seriously considering selling the ridge to address some budget challenges. It would be a short-term fix to a problem with other fix options available. It would be a long-term loss, and you are 100% correct. It would have a damaging effect on golf courses all over the valley.
All right, Paul, before I set you loose, what comes our way on another edition of Utah Golf Radio tomorrow morning?
We continue our tour through Players of the Year. It is awards season, and so we'll be talking with some of the awards recipients from of Player of the Year awards from the Utah Golf Association. Plus, we're going to have a conversation. Been looking forward to this. We're going to have a conversation with Dave Shedlowski, one of the legendary writers from Golf Digest. He was at Black Desert. He was there for the Bank of Utah Championship, and we're going to get his take from his vantage point on what it was like to be at that tournament on that course.
Paul, thank you, my friend, for the time. Have a great weekend. Have a great show, and try to get out before the snow falls, okay?
I know, right?
That's
Thanks,
on
man.
its way. All right, Paul Pugmire, Utah Golf Radio. We are going to call an audible because Trevor Riley is a real-life Batman, and we don't know where he is. We hope he's okay. He's not responding to our phone calls. We were hoping to have Trevor live in studio during the 4 o'clock hour, but we will shift gears and talk more Big 12 and Utah football and BYU football. We'll get you ready for Utah, Texas Tech with Kevin Reynolds from the Salt Lake Tribune. And maybe we'll hear from Trevor between now and then. You never know. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Trevor Riley will join us via telephone coming up after 4:30. You're stuck in San Diego, but our guy is okay. All right, that's the most important thing. So stay tuned. We'll get a preview of the big game tomorrow, talk some Utes. But let's welcome in one of our favorites. It's been a minute from the Salt Lake Tribune. It's always good to catch up with Kevin Reynolds, covers college football for the Trib. Kev, happy Friday, man. How we doing?
What's up, Spence? How are you?
I'm good. You've been swinging a golf club lately? You've been getting out there at all?
I wish. The last time I went out was with you, so trying to get out though before it gets too cold.
Is it official that you're the best golfer of anyone on the Salt Lake Tribune staff?
Aaron, I mean, I keep hearing stories that Aaron shot that 75 one day, so I'm always chasing that. But I'm really I think my next goal is to chase you. That's what I'm really trying to do. But we'll see. I got a way to go.
You're coming for me. I can feel it. I'll tell you one thing. You're better than Andy. Okay, it's a consensus that you're better than Andy Larson.
I thought for a long time because Andy, I had the impression that he played high school golf, and it turns out that wasn't true at all. He played golf just for like a couple months for like a clinic or something. So I had this impression of him that he was a great golfer, and I mean, he's working on it. He says so.
He's very much not a great golfer. If he played in if he played in high school, that was a high school with a graduating class of 5. Okay, so let's just be very, very clear. We love you, Andy. We love you, Andy. Have you played with Monson? Have you played with Monson yet?
Never.
Okay.
No. Have you?
Yeah, Gordon's actually not. He's sneaky. He can hit it a long way. And his wife is into it now, so he's been playing quite a bit. So Gordon actually might be on par with Aaron, but I think you're better than both. That's my take.
I appreciate it. I know Gordon's kind of on the injured list right now because of the ankle and the Achilles situation, so I don't know where he's at right now, but I can see it. I know he likes golf, so I've never played with him.
Yeah, he came hobbling in studio last week. I felt bad for our guy, but I digress, Kev. I digress.
Yeah.
All right, so big one tomorrow. But before we get there, it's been a little while since we've had you on the show, and you've been in the market for a minute. Was that the first opportunity you had to cover a Utah BYU game in Provo?
Yeah, first one in Provo.
What were your impressions now that you have covered a rivalry game in Salt Lake and now one in Provo?
I think the one in Utah last year I thought was a little bit more hostile than the one in Provo was this year. And I think there was a lot of reasons for that, and I think there was a lot going into that game last year just because of the way Cam Rising went down and kind of the season that Utah thought they were going to have was derailed, and BYU was unexpectedly good, which honestly is kind of similar to this year. But I think in terms of the hostile crowd, I thought last year was probably a little bit better. But BYU is also a bigger stadium, so I think you can kind of swap the hostility a little bit for maybe just a higher volume of people in Provo. But I really like this rivalry. I like covering it, and it's impressed me because I didn't know pretty much anything about BYU Utah before getting to Utah.
So for the third straight time, BYU comes out on top away from the atmosphere. How did you digest that game, the decisions of the Utah coaching staff to be very aggressive and BYU's ability to not just hang in the trenches, but get it done when they needed to?
I know everybody's talking about these fourth down decisions. And I mean, I don't know Kyle Whittingham as well as guys like CK know Kyle Whittingham and have covered him and all these people who've been around the market for so long and done such a good job. But, my understanding of it was that, he's leaned into analytics for a long time, and he's definitely leaned into analytics, at least as far as since I've been here. So I wasn't exactly shocked by any of the decisions on fourth down. I think you obviously look back and you can argue that you take a couple field goals here and there, maybe the outcome's a little bit different. But I also think maybe BYU plays that final drive a little bit differently where, Devin Dampier and all them, they go down and score pretty easily on BYU in the last 2-3 minutes of that game and cut it from 10-3. So, I mean, I think it's tough to judge Kyle Whittingham on that just because I think that's what he's been doing for a long time. And also how much confidence that they have in a field goal kicker who missed one, before that timeout from Kalani that they end up going for it on that fourth down from around 35 or what it would have been a 46-yard field goal. So that's one thing. But the bigger takeaway I would say from that game is regardless of what that individual outcome was, I think it has been building to this the last few years where BYU is in the Big 12. They have more resources. We see what resources can do. I mean, Jay Hill is getting paid, being one of the highest paid coordinators that BYU's ever had, and he transforms his defense. He recruits at a really high level. Aaron Roderick is finally able to get some help. I mean, you look at the offensive line, look how big of a difference TJ Woods makes for BYU rather than Daryl Funk. And also Kevin Gilbride, I think, deserves a lot of credit too, because you look like a guy like Carson Ryan, pivotal in that game. That's a guy who wouldn't even have played at BYU before, just because I don't think BYU had the resources to really make that work in terms of recruiting, but also like how to use tight ends. Like now they're using tight ends really well, and we see that. And like Aaron Roderick has all these weapons and options. I think he's been a really good play caller for a long time, but I think the offense has taken a huge step up. And then I think Roderick also deserves a ton of credit for how he's handled a true freshman in Bear Bachmeier. So overall takeaway, though, I would just say is like BYU with more of an even footing. I think we're starting to see, where this rivalry was so lopsided for about a decade in terms of talent has really evened out over the last 3 years. And in some ways, like you look at some of the positions, you could even argue that BYU maybe has a little bit of a talent advantage at a lot of key spots, particularly at the skill positions. Like I'm thinking wide receiver, tight end. You could make the argument for quarterback going forward too, I think.
Yeah, you referenced the resources at BYU's disposal, and I know you've done some reporting on this for the Trib, and I know it's wildly uncomfortable for a certain group of people that is very uncomfortable with certain uncomfortable truths. But it's somewhat undeniable, and I said it 5 years ago. I actually forgot that I had said it. My old producer sent me a clip when NIL kind of became a reality. I said, look, this school, about 40 miles down south, have been waiting for a long, long time for an angle to get them back to relevance that, quite frankly, they haven't had since Lavelle was there. And one of the main things was simply a Big 12 invite. Now you're a P4 team. Now you have a conference. But this, to me, was something that we could have seen coming for a long, long time as a result of the understanding that folks down there have of the power of the purse, the approach of the LDS community when it comes to their resources and where they allocate them. And certainly you have a group of very faithful people that believe the athletic department is a conduit to a message being spread that they believe in. And if that's the case, it's how much is the check and where can I send it? And it's been very clear that they have been among, if not the top spenders, to attract talent in both basketball and football. What have you been able to learn as far as how they've gone about this, and how has this economic model benefited Brigham Young the most?
Well, I think it's unquestionable, regardless of what everybody says. Like, it's unquestionable BYU has a ton more resources. I mean, we wrote this a couple months ago. BYU has doubled their athletic department budget, their athletics budget since 2020. So in a really short amount of time, they've put a ton of money into this athletic department, both basketball, obviously, but also football has gotten a considerably larger kind of sum of money to work with. And you see that with recruiting and you see that with coaches. But the first thing that I think of when you think about it, when you ask the question, is like a story that I think some people got upset about, but I think it's worth asking, is like, is there a line between what the church says versus what BYU athletics, like the mission is? Like, where is that line? Because we wrote this in August where Clark Gilbert said on a podcast last year after BYU was 7-0, they beat Oklahoma State, and like kind of it wasn't like the crowning achievement for the program, but I mean, that's a huge milestone for a program for so long. It's wanted to be in the college football playoff discussion. They're there. And then he comes out and says, BYU's never going to be Texas. They're never going to be Alabama. They're never going to be, what really drove the conversation. He said that they were never going to be the top spender on any single player in a recruiting, cycle, which is really probably an impossible ask, because like, how do you even really monitor if you're the top person or if you're coming in, 30 cents below? I don't really know if you can do that, but also it raises the bigger not the moral question, but the bigger question of like the direction that Clark Gilbert and some of the leaders in Salt Lake and the commissioner of education think of how BYU and NIL operate versus what the reality is, because we've seen it over the last, 6 months, even since he said that. I mean, since that time happened, AJ Devanza has signed at BYU. Rob Wright obviously has been brought in from Baylor, and you have Ryder Lyons, you have Brock Harris. Like I talked to Brock Harris like last month, went down to St. George, and we talked extensively with him and his family about how BYU is signing multi-year contracts with guys, and like it costs millions of dollars to bring in 4- and 5-star players. So like, where is that line? Is there a line? And like, are these two ideals matching? And I think like that's the question that probably doesn't have an answer right now. Like, I don't know if it ever will have an answer, but like, I think it's definitely on the top of mind as BYU has so much more resources. Because BYU athletics will say, hey, like this is in the mission. Like this is in line with what BYU wants to do. The better BYU is, the more attention is on the church. But it's also not exactly what the leader of the of the commissioner of church of education said is what he wants. So I think it's a question we're still going to keep answering, or at least keep asking people who do have the answers. Like, I think that's going to be inevitable until these two missions kind of clearly align. And right now, I think, depending on who you ask, I don't know if they would give you the same answer.
Yeah, and look, it's just it's okay to say out loud because the model's working, and whenever these conversations come up, you do have to be very clear that this isn't tithing money. It's not church money. These are powerful, rich BYU boosters and BYU alum that care about sports, and that's the name of the game. Whether it's Texas Tech or BYU or Notre Dame, and whenever faith gets involved and religion gets involved, people get a little squeamish. But look, if you are a CEO, a business owner that went to Brigham Young or loves BYU football, you're well within your rights to donate and spend to help them, add talent or help them keep coaches. I don't understand why people are so afraid to say it out loud. The only caveat is we understand it's not coming from the church or tithe payers. It's coming from rich BYU alums who care about BYU sports, and that is a good thing that they have that dynamic going for them.
Yeah, and I think that's like, this is legal. Like, it's obviously like that. The question isn't whether they can do it.
Right.
That's not the question anymore. So you're right. It's like the questions that BYU is answering is really just about the direction, I think, of like what the multiple, leadership positions, depending on whether you're Kalani or whether you're Clark Gilbert, what their version of this looks like. And I think that might be a little bit different, but also like leadership changes. Like, how long is Clark Gilbert going to be there? Like, not forever, right? Like, how long is Kalani Stockton going to be there? Not forever. I mean, I'm not saying any of those guys are leaving, but like I think these also are questions that change depending on who you're going to ask. Like, I think Brian Santiago versus Tom Homo is like another example of that. Like, Brian Santiago has been very aggressive on this front from the basketball side of like pouring resources in, and like you've seen it work. Like Kevin Young, it costs a lot of money to keep Kevin Young, a guy who had a lot of options. Like, Brian Santiago said the day he was announced as athletic director, he was worried about Kevin Young potentially going to the Suns, and then you sign Kalani Sitake to a contract extension. So like, it just depends, I think, on like when you're asking these questions, who's answering them, and I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, and again, it's working. They're the only team in the country with a top 10 football team and a top 10 basketball team. So lean into it, give yourself a little pat on the back, and keep doing what's working. But let me ask you, before we get to BYU Tech tomorrow, let me ask you a big picture question here, because we've been debating this on the show. And we had Spencer Litton on from NBA TV. It was live, or excuse me, BYU TV. I have NBA TV on in the studio from BYU TV, live in Lubbock. And it's undeniable that BYU has certain metrics that indicate that it's good. Number one, they win, and that's all that matters. There is a scoreboard in sports, so we know whether or not you're good at winning because the final score indicates as much. So they're clean. They've passed every test in front of them. They're 8-0. They're undefeated in conference. They're the number 7 team in the country, according to the CFP. Then you dig into these other metrics. As it pertains to FPI, S&P Plus, some of the advanced metrics that the committee does use indicates there are people that dig into college athletics and college football utilizing data and metrics and numbers that still have serious questions. If you look at the S&P Plus, BYU is number 16 in the nation. If you look at the Football Power Index, BYU is number 14 in the nation. Vegas has installed Tech as a 10.5-point favorite. Why do you think there continues to be all these questions about a team that is just winning football games, 19-2 in their last 21 and 8-0 this year?
I think part of it, I think it's probably true is that there's a freshman quarterback, and BYU probably doesn't have as many stars as Texas Tech does, and the recruiting rankings would also show you that like Texas Tech is a very good team and really talented at all these positions. And I think there's probably a part of it too where there was the idea that BYU wasn't going to be very good this year. And like, listen, like I had a lot of doubts about whether BYU is going to be good as soon as Jake Retzlaff left. But, you know, I think that's part of it. But I also think there's the other side of BYU hasn't really blown teams out necessarily when they've had the chance, at least in the power conference games. I mean, you could argue, like you look at some of the preseason games. I mean, BYU didn't play a very hard preseason schedule at all. When you look at Stanford, like you look at East Carolina, you look, like you kind of look down and you don't have a ton of strength of schedule there. I think that might hurt it. And, you know, they escaped Colorado. They come back against Iowa State. Like, but at the end of the day, like this team keeps winning. And I also think like just the nature of where this team is and how they play. Like, I don't know how many teams are really going to blow out because this team is so dependent on a run game from LJ Martin and Bear Bachmeier combined. And this team's, you know, the identity, I think, of the team is defensively with Jay Hill keeping games, you know, relatively close. And I think it looks a lot really like a Kyle Whittingham Utah team. I mean, you would know that better than me, but it does kind of have that feel of this is a very Utah-like identity. So, I mean, I think that all contributes to maybe some of these metrics that don't favor BYU as much or don't like BYU as much as maybe I know Utah is very high up there in a lot of these metrics in the top 10, right? But I think that's part of it. But I think the other side of it is like how much better, like, is it kind of a moot point if, you know, BYU beat Utah, if BYU beats Texas Tech, like then the metrics don't really matter as much if that happens.
Well, and I think if BYU beat Texas Tech, everyone with questions will shut up because as you referenced earlier, Texas Tech has – well, of the three teams, and I was unpacking this earlier, because if you look at this, it's kind of interesting. BYU, undefeated, highest-ranked team in the college football playoff rankings, but advanced metrics don't like them. Advanced metrics love Utah, but 7-2 and 13th in the college football rankings, so they're, you know, a full 6 spots lower than BYU with 2 losses. Texas Tech among the three, they have both on their side. They're 8 in the CFP rankings, and the advanced metrics love them. So if BYU goes down there, morning time here, but noon Eastern time, a lot of eyes on the game, college game day in town. And again, a Texas Tech team that I would perceive to be among the top 3, Tech, BYU, and Utah. Tech's the one that has both the metrics and the rankings and appears to have the respect of everybody in college football. If BYU goes and gets this done, even if it's some miraculous muff punt, some random thing happens, I think this is the game and this is the opportunity, Kevin, where they have the opportunity just to simply shut everybody up, once and for all if they get this win.
100%. I agree. And I think it's going to be like hard. I don't think this is going to be very easy. This is one of the biggest games that Texas Tech has had on campus with game day in probably over a decade. And I think that, you know, just walking around on campus, I haven't been here very long, but, you know, you see where everybody was camped out. Like, this is going to be a very hostile environment. And I think the biggest question for BYU still is how healthy is LJ Martin in this game? Like, obviously looks like he's going to give it a go, but if he's not 100%, like this is going to put a lot on Bear Bachmeier's shoulders. We saw him improve a little bit against Iowa State. I think he took a huge step in accounting for, 356 yards. And basically, as soon as LJ Martin went out, Aaron Roderick was just content to let him basically touch the ball or run the ball or throw the ball on, I think, 89% of BYU snaps. I think it was something like almost 50 out of BYU's 60-something snaps. So it was a ton put on Bear Bachmeier, but I think that's going to have to happen again if BYU wins. And just because I think this defensive line for Texas Tech is so good, like even if you had LJ Martin healthy, like how much is BYU able to run the ball? And Texas Tech is going to want, I would expect to have, if they're going to lose this game, have Bear Bachmeier, true freshman, beat them instead of LJ Martin and Bear Bachmeier's legs beat them. And I think that's probably the reality, especially because he's shown it a little bit against Iowa State, but there are some of those, questions in the secondary for Iowa State. I know they've had some injuries to the corner position. So can he do it against, just a really good defense? And I thought it was interesting. Jay Hill, I feel like sometimes you can tell how he feels about an opponent. I remember against Colorado, you kind of sensed a little bit throughout that week that he didn't feel like Colorado was maybe as good as they were billed to be going into that Alamo Bowl. This week, I feel like was the complete opposite, where he was very upfront and said, like, there's no weaknesses to this team, and if BYU is going to beat him, I don't like maybe it does come down to a muff punt, but I just don't see having a fluky win against Texas Tech. Like, I just don't see that working for BYU. They're going to have to find something, and I think it's probably going to have to be Bear Bachmeier if it's going to get done.
Yeah, I mean, as you referenced, like Tech's defense, you look at the metrics, they're allowing 76 yards on the ground per game. That's not just best in the Big 12, that's best in the country. I believe LJ is back fully healthy. That's the expectation, correct?
Yeah, that is the expectation.
Okay, so they'll have that. And BYU's O-line has been better than I thought that they were going to be. Bear's best games this year with his arm, West Virginia, who's a glorified high school team, and then Iowa State, where he did make some really good throws against the secondary that's without their two starting cornerbacks. There are moments like the back shoulder fade he threw to Chase against Utah. That's an NFL caliber throw.
Yeah.
So he's got like moments in him. But what impresses you the most? The last true freshman quarterback to lead a P4 team to an 8-0 start, Trevor Lawrence, who won the national championship. I'm not saying BYU is going to do that, but you've got to be undeniably impressed with the way this kid just continues to meet the moment. What stands out most to you?
Yeah. I mean, obviously his running ability, and he showed a little bit of the passing, but the thing that I think makes him really good for this team is he doesn't turn the ball over. Like Jake Retzlaff last year, like I was thinking about this the last couple weeks after BYU beat Utah. Like I think Jake Retzlaff had a great year, and I thought he was very good for BYU, but I don't think he wins that game against Utah because he had a lot of turnover issues when he was at BYU. And in a game that close and in games these close, which BYU's playing in close games all the time, basically, to get to 8-0. And that's not a knock on them. I think that's just what it is. Like, they had to come back against Colorado. They had to come back against Arizona. Like, I forgot about that game. And, obviously Iowa State. And I think part of it is, like, you're allowed to come back and you're allowed to make some mistakes, at least, or you're going to have stalled drives. You're going to be down 14. Like, that's going to happen with a freshman quarterback. But you can't turn the ball over if you're going to overcome those. And eventually, like, are they going to be able to come back from 14 down against Texas Tech? No, that's probably not going to happen. But at the same time, like, how rare is it for a freshman quarterback to not make mistakes, particularly when we've seen guys like Jake Retzlaff and other guys who had time in the system and do make mistakes. And, like, Jake Retzlaff's a good player, and I'm not trying to say, like, compare the two necessarily. But I think that's been the impressive part about Bear Bachmeier to me, is his just lack of turnovers and his ability to keep BYU in games by sometimes just not making mistakes. And when BYU's asked him to do more than that, I think he's answered that too.
All right, let's bottom line this. Again, 10.5-point line. Vegas is screaming at us that they think it's going to be a boat race. I read this earlier, this is a testament to Kalani, man. I mean, in the past, since 2024, BYU's been an underdog 9 times. They're 8-1. The only loss is ASU last year, where they were a 3-point dog. So I don't know that I see a boat race just because of my respect for BYU's ability to hang in there. However, all the metrics favor Texas Tech. What do you think goes down tomorrow morning in Lubbock?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Texas Tech probably is right to be favored in this game, and I think they probably win. But I do think 10.5 is a lot, just because there's been too many times over the last 2 years, like you said, like Kalani Sitake's teams, like, even when you think they're down and out, like, they do put up a fight. And also, like, I think this is really important for BYU if you're talking about the college football playoff chances, not to get blown out in this game. And obviously, like, I don't think Kalani Sitake would ever say it. He wants to win the game and all that stuff. But I think it's really important from a perception standpoint for BYU, if you want to get in as not the conference champion, if you want to make the Big 12 a 2-bid league, which is possible. But you can't get blown out, I don't think, against Texas Tech. You kind of have to show that, I think, going into a top 10 team, you can belong. And I think BYU will keep it close, or at least closer than 10.5. But I do think that's critical for not just BYU. I think it's critical for the Big 12 too. If you're Brett Yormark, I don't think you want to blow out and just kind of have one team standing above the rest, because I think not the recipe if you're going to get a 2-bid league or potentially multi-bid league. That's not the Big Ten and the SEC.
Two-part question. What is Lubbock like? I've never been. It's not necessarily on the bucket list. And what does a handsome young bachelor like Kevin Reynolds find himself doing on a Friday night in Lubbock?
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do tonight. I haven't thought that through that much. But Lubbock is, I don't even, it's not on the bucket list, I would say. But it's, it's a cool college town. And I also, Aaron always says this, or we always joke about this, is like, everybody is like, oh, you got to go to LA, you got to go to these other places. For one night and for Friday and a Saturday, it's not awful to go to a college town, in a Big 12 city that you would never go to if you weren't doing this job,
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I can see Falk in Lubbock like smoking a couple of heaters at like 11:30 before he gets some sleep. So we will set you loose, Kev. Enjoy the game and safe travels. Let's get you out swinging the sticks before the snow falls, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
All right, Kevin Reynolds from the Salt Lake Tribune covers college football with a BYU emphasis for the Trib. Down live at Lubbock. We've got a couple of guests live in Lubbock today. We appreciate that. All right, before we catch a break, we're going to bring in Trevor Riley coming up on the other side. We have a new client on the show, and I'm thrilled because it's a client that I work with. And oftentimes with some clients, I can't give you a personal testimonial, but I can for Game Day Men's Health. So here's the deal. Listen up. If you're aging a little bit, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, what have you, no matter how old you are, and you really want to get back into shape, I'm just going to tell you an easier way you can do it besides kind of gritting your teeth and doing what you can to do it the old school way. Number one, there are no shortcuts with this stuff. Like if you're out of shape, it's just going to take a minute to get back into shape. So I'm in my mid-40s. I'll leave that there. A couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to get in the best shape of my life. It was my goal. Okay, a couple of years ago, I'm like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm back the way I felt when I was in college in my, late teens, early 20s. So I cleaned up some habits. I started eating really clean, and then I started exercising in a way that I hadn't since I was in my 20s. About 3 months passed, and I was despondent. I was disappointed. I'm like, this doesn't work the way that it used to. Back in the day, you give yourself a couple of months of hard work and clean eating, and then you're back in shape. Well, as you age, it's different, right? So a buddy of mine asked me if I'd ever supplemented testosterone before, which I hadn't, and he recommended Game Day Men's Health. So I went in for a consultation, which they're giving you for free, okay? Number one, they're giving you the consultation for free. What the consultation is a little bit of blood work, then you hang out, they go over your levels, and then they recommend some of their products you can use to help you get back into shape in a way that's just a little bit more expedited, okay? So for me, supplementing testosterone and also utilizing their peptides have been the products I've used. And when I started using them, within the next 3 months, after the first 3 months, I made progress that was like twice what I was doing before I utilized some of their supplements. Now, they also have some glutide, tirzepatide, these weight loss products that have hit the market. And if you're pre-diabetic or if you've gained a bunch of weight to the point where you feel unhealthy, they'll help you with those as well, right? I would recommend the testosterone. My energy level's better. I'm sleeping better. My workouts are like 10 times better. That's number one. And I'm currently at the age of 47 in the best shape I've been in probably since I was 22 years old, okay? So these are products that, historically speaking, have been for elite athletes or celebrities or actors or very rich people. But that's not what the deal is here. Because, number one, you get the free consultation. But here's the kicker. If you tell them you heard me talking about it, they're giving you 50% off of your first-year membership. It's the deal I have. It's the deal I use. It makes it insanely affordable. And you'll get back into shape. If your libido is low, I can tell you that it helps with that as well. And I'll leave that there. Go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now. It's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Schedule your consultation. They got a bunch of different locations. Lehigh, Pleasant Grove, Cottonwood Heights is the one I go to, and then South Ogden. Tell them you heard me talking about it. They're going to give you the free consultation with some blood work over your levels, and then they're knocking 50% off your entire first year of membership. It's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. We'll catch a break, and we're going to bring in Trevor Riley coming up on the other side. And don't forget, we're going to have Utah women's basketball on the station tonight, 5:45 pregame, 6 o'clock tip. So a lot to do on a Friday. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Don't forget, we have Utah women's basketball on the station tonight. It is 5:45 for the pregame, 6 o'clock for the tip in Logan. It's Utah USU. The men are back at it tomorrow against Weber. Our next guest, I wish I was looking at his handsome face, maybe with some sunglasses live in studio, but we were able to track Trevor Riley down. Trev, where do we find you on this Friday afternoon?
I got to go pick up my daughter from school. I got the other two, and we're going fishing. Lake Dixon, Escondido.
Oh, very nice. What sort of fish are you expect? What do you pull out of there? What do you pull out of there?
I think it's a trout situation. All right, there's
Okay.
a trout competition here next week, and so we're going to see what it's all about for these three kiddos from Mississippi.
All right, there you go. Well, have fun, be safe. Sounds like a good weekend to be on dad duty for a bye week for the Utes. Hey, I haven't talked to you since we were able to attend the symposium down at UVU that featured my father on the panel, of course, Mark Harlan and Brian Santiago as well. A lot of good, fascinating information when it comes to the current state of college athletics and the challenges these administrators find themselves in. What were some of your takeaways, Trev?
I think that there are Utah and BYU are on two totally different planets financially as far as planning and needs, right? Obvious reasons being the church, but the other obvious reason being Utah is interested possibly, I think, in taking in outside money. I don't think BYU is interested in it. That was the biggest takeaway. Another thing that I took away was a guy like your dad, he's got ideas, okay? That four-man panel they had, I thought your dad had some great ideas, and I'm happy to see the athletic directors listening to people like your father and that are in the field of professional sports, because Mark and the other AD, forgive me, I forgot his name. I think they've both come to the understanding this is now pro sports. So it was kind of like capstoning all my thoughts. Do these guys understand what's going on? And I think they do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And of course, Utah has some challenges that BYU does not, and BYU seems to have figured it out. And I get asked all the time most of my friends or friends that I went to college with that love Utah football, that love Utah athletics, and I get asked all the time about my confidence level in Utah's ability to keep up with this arms race. So I'll ask you and give you the space what your confidence level is in Utah's ability to keep up with this arms race.
I think that it's going to come down to some old elbow grease and ingenuity. I always have to remind myself, BYU had Built Bar. Okay, that's cool. We came in with the Ken Garff trucks, all right? This is a space that we've dominated before, all right? We just kind of reorganized now because now the Sharks are getting involved. And that's another thing I took from your father's group. And I'm going to speak plainly here. A lot of people don't want private money in college sports for good reason, right? Private cap, think about Bain Capital. Okay, Bain's where Mitt Romney used to work. I know your dad worked there for a little bit. Their job is to dismantle and reorganize, and either keep or sell. It's a cutthroat business. And when you bring in that type of leadership and money, that changes the direction of the whole program for everybody. So the balance is going to be figuring out who's going to be in charge of the money. Right? The money's going to come, right? And you have to answer to the money. So my whole idea has been, let's try to get as much big money within the Utah family. Let's get that organized first, and let's keep control of this thing. That's why I like having the ex-players involved. I think they're the missing linchpin here. Coaches and administrators come and go, right, Spence? Mm-hmm. Players never leave, dude. We're here for life. And so we're trying to get everybody in the same room, right? We need like a Ron McBride baptism or something, dude. We got to get everybody in the room like a mafia style and have a talk. Good money, gray money, and old money have all got to sit down with these coaches and GMs and figure out a plan.
You feel like you're making some inroads with your, your project to try to get ex-Ute players involved? Does it feel like you've got a lot of either your former teammates or guys that played here that really care about? Because that's one of the things BYU clearly has, Trev, whether it's ex-players or CEOs or business owners. They've got a lot of deep-pocketed people that care about Utah or BYU football. Do you feel like we're making progress up here in that direction?
I know this. The school had the alumni on the field for homecoming, and look what the score was, dude. All right. I think we and not that I'm not taking credit for that. I'm saying we love that. The fans loved it. I think the players loved it. I think the coaches coached their butts off, and half of them are ex-players anyway, for heaven's sakes. I just am excited to see that we're starting to have these conversations, Spence. I was really excited to hear some of the ideas Mark had. And, Mark's a forward-thinking guy. Again, I always reference the trucks. It's brilliant, dude. I was in Jackson, Mississippi. We're talking about Ken Garff trucks, dude. So I'm very optimistic, actually. I'm very understanding of what's coming in January. Have you ever seen what's the show the guy George wrote? Game of Thrones. Winter is coming, right? Mm-hmm. Winter is coming, Spence. That's the portal window. You said it the other day. It's consolidated into one window now. And if you don't hit on this window, dude, it can and probably will be a very rough season. And I don't mean just scouting, guys. I mean renegotiating with current players. Let's not have some more Town Obasa situations, huh?
Yeah, and it seems like there are always reports of, certain schools reaching out to try to poach certain players and as long as you're not doing anything that's against the rules. And look, if we're honest and we're going to be grown-ups about this, in the history of college athletics, there are always been savvy, maybe sneaky people that have found ways to circumvent rules anyway. So you have to be as frosty as you can be and stay in this game and play it the right way, right? I mean, whether it's renegotiating
Yeah.
to keep some of these guys back or making sure you're adding to instead of being taken from.
So there's two things here I want to say. First and foremost, I believe Mark Harlan plays it straight. I worked for the guy. His first ever meeting, I ever met the guy. He called everybody in the entire athletics department, janitors included, every coach, into the football meeting room. And he said, our goal here as an athletic organization, our first goal is to get to the Rose Bowl. He said, when football wins, we all rise. He taught me that, dude. Gosh dang it, this guy's good. Now, what has happened is, I'm going to repeat this. College football is being run by AAU basketball people. If you don't really know what that means, go watch the HBO documentary. I think it was HBO. It could have been Showtime, on the poor guy, the street agent that the FBI got jammed up. And watch and see. That's what's running college football. Kind of like how the NBA is run by power players, right, Spence? Rich Paul has a lot of say in the league, right?
Yeah, he does.
So that's what's going on here now. There's becoming a thing where, with no salary cap, okay, that changes power structures. That's why in baseball, Scott Boras is the most powerful man in the game, has been for 10, 15 years. That's coming now, and we all know this, Spence. College football is the second most valuable league, maybe in the entire world, when you consider everything goes down to D3. JC, and I was at a junior college today, Riverside City College. Shout out to Kevin Kraft. But that's where we're at now. Mark plays it straight, and the game's run by crooks. So it's going to straighten out, but I believe Mark's on the right path. I think that, courting private money while just being hesitant. You don't want to get married that who was the group they married? The collective group. They ended up being a loser. They fired him. Same guys I got into it with at Colorado. They made that move early on, right? So he's learning. Hey, we're just going to wait and see on a few things here. But just to cap it again, we need $5 to $6 million ideally by January. We need that. Every time we win, Spence, those starters get more expensive, right?
Yep. Are you hearing anything about potentially players leaving? I mean, there's still football left to be played, but is there any concern?
Of course I am.
Okay, tell us what. Okay, tell us what you're hearing.
Everyone calls everybody, right? There's no honor among thieves. And negotiations start after Thanksgiving, dude. So right now everything's not real, right? It gets real when the money's on the line, right? When it's time to sign that contract and the money comes, right? That's January, okay? So December is where it all happens, man. Right after Thanksgiving, the season ends pretty much. You got a 2-week lull, and yes, people are starting to decide: am I getting out of my apartment lease or not? Those conversations are being had at the bottom, and so the street agents, right? They start calling around, and then what happens is you start having a natural progression towards the market for each position. How much am I willing to spend for a starting receiver at Power 4, right? And you go backwards from there, Spence. It's happening every day. It's happening within the organizations. They got agents calling GMs right now and saying, yo, dude, what are we talking about in January? So it's getting to a point now where we really got to have a plan here, and I think there's some urgency from all parties to get some more funds or to get something in the works, right? A plan of some sorts to pay future bills.
Where do you think, generally speaking, and I do actually want to talk about the fact that we have football left to be played in a moment, but in order for Utah to either maintain, because they're on fire right now. I mean, that BYU game certainly was a wake-up. They have just smoked a couple of teams in a row. But to keep up with the Joneses or take the next step, where would you like to see Utah add?
We need receivers, not one or two. We need 4. We need 2 deep at the receivers. You like to have 3 guys and a guy that can roll. It's just hard because at the end of the day, you can't even overpay for guys if you don't have stats, Spence. Like, okay, if you're a free agent, are you coming to the Utah Jazz? No, we're sellers right now, right? Thank goodness our man hurt himself. I hope he's okay. but we might be able to save him now. But you get what I'm saying. We don't have the stats to back up us even bringing guys in, right? If you're a kid who wants to go to the NFL, you're looking at Utah and you're not necessarily excited about catching balls there. So, we might have to overpay a little bit, but there's also some value in maybe buying a high school kid or two. They might be a little cheaper, right? They might be a little more understanding if you can get them playing time. There's different strategies. That's Robert's job and Coach Witt's job. But what we're trying to see right now, Spencer, we're starting to see, if we look at Louisiana, if you're starting to spend a lot of money, right, where there is a lot of money, that's where the power is. And so don't be surprised, right, if politicians and guys like even Mark, they want a little bit more say in how we're going to be spending these dollars.
So when it comes to the future of Utah football, I understand your point about retention, but it does appear that Witt and his staff have built a pretty – now, your point about wideouts, then playmakers on the outside is well taken. I want to give Ryan Davis a ton of credit. I think he's really turned out – now, I think in a perfect scenario, a guy like that's not your number one, but he has really stepped up, and he has had a very, very nice season. I think a season most people didn't expect. But
I agree 100%.
But when you look at the roster, I mean, even Devin, there are a lot of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors on this roster that if you can retain the majority of your talent, then add a piece or two, it does feel like they're in a relatively good spot. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, no one wants to leave Utah, okay? You can that by the staff. I always say, why hasn't anyone been a coordinator off Utah staff in a while? It's too good of a deal. Coach Witt has set up a great place to go to school. The University of Utah set that up. There's a lot of great to Utah. So we can get guys at a hometown discount. We can get that. We don't always have to match because we have the luxury of, it's a fantastic place to go to school. Second almost to none. So we have to just maintain by adding. And I know that sounds crazy, but we need to be able to add 2 or 3 or 4 guys, but we're going to have to start maintaining these guys. We don't have to necessarily buy a lot of guys, Spence, but we need this money to put a little cushion here on a few of these big dogs that are going to be expensive, and then to go out and get 2 or 3 or 4 guys. To your point, I don't think we're big buyers next season. I just think we got to buy correctly if we want to get over these hump of not losing these 2 games, right? We're just so close. Okay, I think that's the salt we need to make this meal go from a drive-through to a sit-down at least.
Yeah, and, to your point, when it comes to what Kyle has built and just simply the ability to point to the kids he sent along into the NFL, namely like yourself, I mean, there is a story to be told here. So if you were pitching somebody, if Witt or Morgan called you and said, Trev, there's a defensive lineman in the San Diego area, go down and tell him why he should play at Utah. And regardless of position, because D-line's an obvious one. Let's say it's a wideout, okay, which is what they need. There's a speedy wideout down in San Diego, a mile away from you. Go pitch him for us. What would you say? What would that pitch look like?
Well, it would look like this. You're going to get eyes on your film every single play, a lot of them, because we're a great team. And you're going to say, does it really matter how many balls you catch in college if you don't play well in the NFL? And they're going to say, what do you mean? And I say, well, these guys are going to teach you how to catch the ball, run the right routes, do all the stuff you learn other places, but we block better than everybody else and we win. And some of the guys aren't going to like to hear that, and those are the guys that probably aren't good for Utah. You know what I'm saying? We can lean into what we got going on. Tim Patrick, he liked coming here. He'd come back. Bailey, he liked it. It's just going to take a little bit of elbow grease. And again, I'm going to lean on these ex-players. We got to start building a scouting network of sorts, right, where we can help each other out. Like someone out there make an app where we can have a Facebook for Utah football. I know we can just do a Discord or something, but we need that type of thing because much like Iowa, right? I always look at Iowa. Similar coaches. I played with Ferentz's son in New England. I bet you he could have been Kyle Whittingham's son, right? Played center for us. And his dad's been there forever, Coach Witt has. And we have the same vulnerabilities in a lot of ways here, Spence, okay? When we have great tailbacks, we dominate. We got great linemen, unbelievable tight ends. Quarterback plays above average. But we lack at that speed spot. And so we have to kind of map and follow that a little bit. I believe we have something to sell if we have a great staff. I love our OC. I think he'll be up for a head job if we keep winning. And finding a way to plug that hole, that'll be another thing, Spence. I'm kind of babbling on here, but that's another thing there. Who's going to recall the offense next year? There's a high possibility Beck's going to be out of here. So that could be something.
You've been that impressed with Jason. You think he's head coaching material?
Absolutely. He's had a quarterback injury. He has receivers that aren't very good at some spots, and he's got other ones that are good at others. He's making the offense work with tight ends and running backs. And he scaled it, dude. I mean, he did what he did at New Mexico, and we all were sitting here like, okay, let's see how it goes. And you know what? The stats don't lie. So far, the numbers aren't lying. It's not exactly what anybody would want, but you can never be perfect. I think he's making $1 out of 15 cents, especially because of the fact that he isn't throwing the ball well down the field. We're still dominating people. And I'm going to say this again. Give the ball to one and watch what happens, Spence. I'm telling you.
Did you mean to quote Tupac just now? Do you realize that's what you did?
No, but okay. I used to listen to enough of his music, so okay whatever. I won't take credit for it, but yeah, that sounds about right.
No, I like it. And I agree with you. I think Wayshawn has kind of separated himself. But let's move over here before I have to set you loose. Since you and I last spoke, the CFP rankings were released, and Utah is at 13, Trev. That's up 4 spots from their AP spot. Were you surprised to see that? What do you make of it?
Everybody still loves a team that can run over somebody, especially with Philadelphia setting the tempo for the rest of the football world. This is how you win at the highest level. We look like them. Sans 2 receivers, Devontae Smith, Heisman winner, and big fella Brown, who looks like an American gladiator. So we have the blueprint, dude. We're right there, man. Roseman's the best in the game. And I think Bleckham, if you really want to talk about a guy who gets no credit, right, underpaid, I think he's probably bottom 10, 15% paid at GMs in the country. And to your point, Spence, we got a story to tell. And I'm going to have to say, he's doing a hell of a job, dude. He's doing a great job.
So, little known fact, once upon a time, Trevor Riley was recruited to play his college football at Texas Tech, and the eyes of the college football world will be on Texas Tech, BYU, and Lubbock coming up tomorrow. Texas Tech is a 10.5-point favorite, Trev. My advice to my listeners is do not bet on sports, but this line feels really big. BYU's been an underdog 9 times since 2024. They're 8-1. In those games, but most of the metrics heavily favor Tech tomorrow, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. What do you think is going to go down?
I'm taking Jason IU over CJ IU. Okay, Jason coached me, all right? His son Tano is a guy I coach, and we're working with Stroshine. CJ IU is what makes that team go. He's the defensive coordinator there. I didn't even know that till last Saturday. I saw him on TV, this buff guy, looked like The Rock. And I said, oh, my gosh, that's CJ IU. Played at Oklahoma. His brother's on the staff at BYU, Jason IU. And I just think BYU has that mentality right now. Utah was favored against them, and they got this unbelievable swagger about them that I'm rooting on. So I'm hoping and praying that these guys whoop up on Tech and wreck them because we need them to win outright. We need Tech to lose. So that's why they asked me why. I think Big Bro's in play here. He's going to Big Bro him.
So you're taking BYU?
BYU, dude, and I think BYU can beat them by more than a score, man. I like them.
Wow. Okay.
I like them, dude. I like the tailback. I love Ford, man. And the quarterback, he's made a few errors the whole season. He's unbelievable. Plus, they got Jay Hill and Kalani and Gary Anderson. I'll take my chances. And A-Rod. They got some real dudes over there, man.
Let me ask you this question. Texas Tech's defense is allowing 76 rushing yards a game. It's the best in the country. If they're able to shut down 4, and that's L.J. Martin, who's back healthy, and they just basically dare Bear to beat them with his arm, have you seen enough from him to believe that he can do that?
No, I haven't. But I've also seen enough to say that it may not matter because he may just run it. He's a guy that seems to he'll slam a square peg into a round hole and do it gracefully. I know that sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but he really finds a way to get it done, Spence. You know what I'm saying? Some of those guys, you think like Anthony Mason, that busted free throw form he had. He rebounded. Okay, he's on the block. He's diving on the – and this guy's doing those type of things at quarterback, okay? He barely jumps over the guy, and instead of taking a big hit, he falls lightly onto the ground. He's just a smooth cat, man. He's really, really a smooth guy, and he reminds me of Jalen Hurts. The body, the style of play, and right now Jalen's the best thing going in the NFL as far as winning is concerned.
We got an Anthony Mason pull from Trev on a Friday. I love that. Last thing, I'll set you loose. It has become very clear And like the Big Ten and probably the SEC too, the Big 12 is very top heavy. There are three very good teams. It's Texas Tech, it's BYU, it's Utah. Rank them in order. The Trevor Riley 1 through 3 ranking is what?
BYU's 1. I'm going to say Tech is 2 because they beat us. Right? I'll give them their flowers. And I say we're 2B 3. Okay, meaning I think we're getting better every week. So watch out for that one because I do believe, as does Vegas, per the spreads, we do have the best roster. How you favored in every game pretty much for 3 years, dude? Yep. What's that say about you? That's Coach Whitty. That's coaching and roster. So I'm a believer in us 100%. It's just one of those deals where we're on the other side here now, Spence. Usually we fade out, right? Our story's been at the end of the seasons a lot of times we'll drop a game here or there that we shouldn't have. So I think this year, with the lack of tackling in the preseason and really the more laissez-faire approach that Coach Wood took, I really see us as peaking at the right time. So I'm going to say in a long answer, Utah has the potential quickly to be 1 if we get a shot in the dance.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you for the time. We're going to let you go catch some trout, okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Trevor Riley, former Ute, longtime NFL vet, always telling it how it is. Appreciate his time today. We'll catch a break. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program. Don't forget we're saying goodnight a little early. Utah women's basketball taking on Utah State and Logan. Pregame at 5:45. Tip-off at 6. Keep it right here on ESPN 700.